Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to TPW Takedown, episode 10. I am your host, Larry.
Okay. Let's see if my co-host will join us. Like I said, if this don't work, we're going to do my plan B I've been doing just in case it does act funky. So let's hope that it enters them in. We'll try it twice, if not three times. And if it starts acting wonky, we're going to go to my plan B. Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Uno momento, por favor.
Okay. Take your time. Uh,
There we go.
hello?
Hello, hello.
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Cool. Well, it's good to be back with this. How are you doing?
It's been busy lately.
Well, you've been a busy man. You've been working, been making that cash though, been grinding.
That and helping the wife try to make things better here, best I can.
What happened with the stream?
She was having issues with Streamlabs and the Xbox in general. She's just frustrated, so we're just gonna we're gonna do this. I don't know if she's gonna be joining us for the conversation or not. I think she's gonna do her dailies on Phasma with Jay real quick, and she might join us afterwards.
Okay, that's awesome. Always welcomed. And as I was telling the people beforehand, if it wasn't going to let you in and we had to do it at least twice, I have a plan B for whenever we do have technical difficulties, which I'll show you another day. But right now, our plan A is working out perfectly. And I do want to start off by saying, ladies and gentlemen, this is not your typical TPW takedown because this episode is solely dedicated to possibly one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, The Undertaker.
He is the greatest.
My all-time favorite will be Kane, but that's why I'm also saying one of the greatest of all time is Undertaker.
We can agree to disagree on that one.
Like I said, that's just my personal opinion. I've always said this. Kane will always be my number one. Undertaker is my number two.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. But we're all talking, This is not an in-character thing. This is out of character. We're talking how we really feel about The Undertaker and his legendary career. And I have a bunch of notes written down after I let Kerry say what he wants to say real quick before I even go down these like stats of The Undertaker. But Kerry, you want to talk about The Undertaker a little bit before we get fully into it?
Really, the biggest thing I want to say about Taker is there's never been anybody more loyal to WWE and the universe and to a character and gimmick that was originally not supposed to take off as well as it did. So with that in mind, he took something and just ran with it, and the fans gravitated towards it, and I was one of them. And before I forget it, I'll share one of my early stories. And it's kind of embarrassing because I sound stupid after after thinking about it. So in 1994, there was a particular pay-per-view SummerSlam 1994, which featured Ted DiBiase's Undertaker versus Paul Bearer's Undertaker. That was the first real exposure to the dead man that I got. And it was my cousin who told me that Taker in the black with the purple gloves was the original Taker. So prior to SummerSlam 1994, anytime I saw Taker in his black and gray getup, I would always tell everybody that's fake Undertaker, because that's how I knew, but I was literally 3 or 4 years old. I didn't know any better. I didn't know that Taker had been in the business longer than that. I would only see him every now and then and didn't really pay much attention because prior to me really taking notice of Taker, Jake Roberts was my favorite. So there's my embarrassing story.
I really don't see that as embarrassing. At least it's like honesty, and you're not being like, "Oh yeah, I saw him in this, that." I'm glad that you're being genuine about it. Like I know that the Undertaker versus Undertaker is not really like one of everybody's like most favorite thing of all time, but like I still love the fact that you were able to tell that story. And also, Carrie, I did invite one of my buddies here. This is Daryl Williams. Daryl, this is Carrie.
Hey there.
How you doing?
I'm all right, my friend.
He's also a fan of The Undertaker, and he wanted to be here for this. And before I even go into his stats, I want him to can you tell us the first memory that you have of Undertaker, Daryl, and what you thought about Undertaker?
As The Undertaker or
as anything, like whenever you saw him first, like even if it was under a different name.
First time I ever saw him, he was Mean Mark Callis, and he was with the Skyscrapers in NWA, and then Dan Spivey. And Teddy Long. I believe if I'm not mistaken, Teddy Long managed them.
I thought that was WCW.
NWA, WCW.
Fair enough.
Yeah, pretty basically the same thing. But yeah, that was the first time I ever saw him, and that was the first time he would do the walk on the rope, but he wouldn't be holding anybody's arm. He'd kind of step out a little way onto the rope, and then he'd jump and he'd like elbow drop the people when they were on the ground. I thought he was pretty. I thought he had a lot of promise as far as that went, but then he wasn't there anymore. And shortly after that, he showed up in WWF as the Undertaker, and I knew who it was when he showed up. But yeah, the Undertaker, and I learned a lot about communicating with people in general from listening to the Undertaker. It's funny that you would mention Jake Roberts because I learned a lot about communicating with people in general from Jake Roberts as well. I don't talk very loud, and I don't talk very loud because I figured out by watching them and how they would cut promos. Back then, Undertaker wouldn't talk a lot, but when he did talk a lot, he talked very low. Jake Roberts was really the same way. He didn't really like raise his voice. He was just talking to you. And I figured out that if you do that, then people pay more attention to you because they have to pay more attention to you to hear what you're saying.
Jake said that in an interview. Jake mentored Taker.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense then. So yeah, both of those guys, the Undertaker and Jake Roberts, had a just communicating with people in general. They had a lot of influence. Just communicating with people in general. I mean,
it's interesting how you brought up how you talk quietly and stuff because I do too. Of course, a lot of that is just me by nature. But when I in EFED play darker heel type characters, I draw on Jake Roberts and the darker gimmicked and persona characters for inspiration when I do those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
So if I ever do a voice promo, I typically do speak low if I'm a heel. Brandon, you can actually verify this. When I was playing as Consequence, do you remember how I would promo as him?
Are you here?
Yes, I liked how you promised us Consequence and what you did to get rid of consequence.
I, in such short time, had everybody hating Consequence. Remember?
Mm-hmm. He got heat.
So
You got heat with that character.
lots. So, but yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from on that one, Daryl. And Taker learned to do that from Jake Roberts himself.
So go investigate. It's pretty dope. It makes sense. It makes sense. So yeah, that's pretty dope.
And if we were all remember, I think you guys can also attest, they were a group on screen for a bit in a sense, because remember, Jake Roberts and Undertaker were torturing Randy Savage. It was mainly Jake, but you would see them together. But then there was that point where the Undertaker turned on Jake, and that's what led to WrestleMania eight, I believe, where eight. And then that's where Undertaker had his second streak match, was against Jake. His first was against Jimmy Snuka. And we'll talk about the streak as we get more into it. But yeah, they were a group, and you are right. Jake mentored Undertaker, and Undertaker was mentored by many of people too, like Paul Bear. We can't talk about Undertaker without mentioning somebody that helped get Undertaker to where he is today. And Paul Bear was like his literal dad. Even though he played his on-screen dad, he was like a father to Taker, even outside the ring. And he helped get Undertaker where he is because he would do most of the talking for Undertaker, but then Undertaker would hit it with like a one-liner at the end or whatnot. And then there was that eventual time, which we'll talk about later, where they had that betrayal and it led to different storylines, and we got to see the Undertaker develop on his own. But I love how Undertaker developed and what he looked like with the mortician and with his suit, his tie, that black trench coat, the gloves. So iconic when you see him like that.
So you mentioned his one-liners, and then I'm gonna circle back to the rivalry with Jake. That one promo where Jake was like, "Whose side are you on?" And we hear for the first time Taker actually really loud go, "Not yours," that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And whenever Undertaker would talk, you just love to listen. And I'm excited that we get a chance to talk about him. And I do want to go over some stats here that you guys may know, of course, but we'll also be talking about his career as Mark Callis. You get the point and you get the gist. But Undertaker was born Mark Calloway, his real name, on March 24th, 1965 in Houston, Texas. He is a current American retired pro wrestler, and he is part of the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2022 and is the brand ambassador as well as a writer and executive producer for AAA, which is going very successfully. And throughout his whole entire wrestling career, he has went by many names, as such as we know The Undertaker. He went by Kane, The Undertaker. He went by Commando. He went by Boris Ragu. He went by Mark Callis, Mean Mark Callis, and Mean Mark. Dice Morgan, Master of Pain, Punisher, Texas Red Jack. He was trained by 3 different individuals at separate times. We know one of them was Buzz Sawyer, but he also was trained by Rick Davidson and John Davidson. His official wrestling debut was in 1984, and he lasted until November 22nd, 2020. And he had a historic career under different gimmicks, as we talked about, like in the World Wrestling Federation / World Wrestling Entertainment, from 1990 to 96 to when he returned to it in 2004 to 2019, he was the Dead Man gimmick and the Mortician and such. And he developed that character very well, and he made his debut at Survivor Series 1990. And he retired in 2020 at that Survivor Series and had one of the best documentaries. I don't know if you guys ever watched it. You guys should definitely go check it out. He was the Lord of Darkness. Seen it. Yeah. He was the Lord of Darkness from 1996 to 2000, where he led the ministry and such, and we'll get into that. He was also the American Badass, of course, from 2000 to 2004, but he also returned in it in 2020. And yeah, he made his debut with that gimmick at Judgment Day 2000. And in CCW / the WCWA and World Class Wrestling Association, which was called the World Class Wrestling Association. He was Texas Red and the Punisher, and he had an infamous match against Bruiser Brody. In World Championship Wrestling, he was part of the Skyscrapers, as Daryl said, with Dan Spivey as Mean Mark Callis. In the CWA, Continental Wrestling Association, and the United States Wrestling Association, he was known as the Master of Pain and the Punisher. And there was a brief period where he was in New Japan Pro Wrestling as the Punisher Dice Morgan and MPW Michinoku Pro Wrestling in 1997. And he also was in Central Illinois Wrestling and Southern Championship Wrestling as the Commando. Before we go into that, you guys want to talk about these gimmicks? We'll start with Gary.
On the truck. That was your job.
I don't know as much about those. Like Daryl said before, I saw him briefly in WCW as Mean Mark Callis, and he replaced, I believe, Sid as part of the Skyscrapers with Dan Spivey. It was supposed to be, I believe, Sid Justice, and there was some kind of controversy, I guess, where Sid wasn't there. And with the Skyscrapers, I believe they lasted a very short time, and then, as Taker said in the documentary, Dan looked at him one day and said, "I'm done," and just winked at him and left, basically.
Yeah, he just left. Yep.
And a lot of people don't realize this. In his run in WCW, he did fight Sting. Sting beat him, but the whole dream match, Sting versus Taker, technically did happen. They just wasn't in their well-known dark gimmicks at that time. So with that in mind, that match did happen. I truly would love to have seen them in their darker gimmicks, which we'll probably get to that later on. But I've seen maybe one or two matches with him as Punisher Dice Morgan. I believe he fought Terry Funk in one of those matches.
Yeah.
I don't recall exactly. But yeah, I mostly know him as Taker and secondary Mean Mark Callis.
Understood.
Yeah,
Thank
basically
you.
the same for me. I've seen video of him wrestling in different places, but as far as really knowing his body of work, it starts abbreviatedly with the whole Skyscrapers thing, and then once he became Undertaker, and I wasn't, and I've told you that we discussed this ad nauseum. I wasn't really watching WWF like that back in those days because we really didn't get a lot of WWF programming around here. Where I'm at, we got more of the NWA, WCW, when NWA became WCW, World Class, USWA, AWA, things of that nature. I didn't really start watching WWE until just before the Attitude Era kicked off. Round about the time Steve Austin won the King of the Ring was when I really started watching and paying attention to the WWF.
Sounds like you and I are about the same age range and time watching wrestling when we really got started in WWF, WCW stuff. Because I very much remember and enjoyed the Monday Night Wars. It was like, I tell this story a lot. Growing up, my family and I were so invested in both WCW and WWF that in the living room we would have WWF going, but in the kitchen we had a miniature TV that sat on top of the refrigerator with WCW on it, and we would go back and forth between commercial breaks to see what was happening.
I would just do it on the TV until I figured out that WCW had a replay. Right after Nitro went off, WCW would have a replay right after that. Thunder would as well. And so I got to the place where I would just watch WWF all the way through, and then I'd get over to TBS or TNT, whichever day it was, and I'd watch the WCW show after that. But Yeah, pretty much the same, man. I used to have a really extensive VHS collection. I'd have every Raw, every SmackDown, every pay-per-view. It was, man, it got lost in storage. I wish I still had it because it was nice for a little while.
It'd
It was
probably be
good.
worth a lot of money now too.
Probably would have been. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I didn't mean to hijack the program.
Yeah, no, you're good. Freaking, I'm glad that you guys are able to express this. And as we get into this, I know Daryl wants, I know if he does, he's told me some stories regarding the whole Monday Night War. So if we do ever talk about that again throughout this, there's a story I think he'll tell you about regarding mankind and such. And I think he knows which one I'm alluding to. But
Oh yeah, that was
Oh, yeah.
that was the big reason why I ended up, I started really watching. That was the bigger reason why I really started watching WWF over WCW when that happened. That was I believe that was a turning point for a lot of people at that point in time.
Yeah, at that time, I know exactly what you're referring to. WCW was really struggling, and they were doing a lot of shady tactics when it came to, fair competition in that regards. And yeah,
Yeah.
when they kept slandering the competition. I get it. You want to trash talk a little bit, but you don't say some of the things that Shivani and others said about your competition, because at the end of the day, you're all in the same business. There is a mutual respect among wrestlers, and they just stomped all over that.
And it really backfired on WCW if you think about it, regarding like when they've spoiled Mankind winning the WWF title. Oh, great! Look how much people turn their channels to WWE. Like, well, WWF at the time, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it definitely
Yeah.
it put asses in seats, just like Shivani said it would. It definitely put asses in seats. It
And
certainly caused me to turn the station.
I believe that same night Taker had a match as well. I just don't remember against who. I know during that time he was either involved or it had either just wound down his rivalry with Kane, I believe. Either that or the ministry was just starting to take off. One of those
it was
two
around
times.
'98 when Mankind became WWF champion. So
Okay.
at that time, Undertaker was with the ministry, and then we also what happened with the ministry with it becoming the corporate ministry, and then he had the unholy alliance with Big Show, which we'll also get to.
Yeah. Okay. I knew I wasn't far off. It depended on when it fell that year, because earlier that year he wasn't part of the ministry. He was still the Lord of Darkness leading into the ministry.
Yes, for a good period there. Then we started to see he started to kidnap certain superstars, and he had the acolytes do it, which we'll also talk about later. But that was an interesting story.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, I do want to take a minute here to go over some of the Undertaker's accomplishments before we start getting into his
There you go.
whole career from where he started to where he went later in life. And that I'm going to start with the title accomplishments. He was a USWA Unified World Heavyweight Champion. He was a WCWA Texas Heavyweight Champion. He got a bronze statue in 2022. The titles he held in WWE/WWF. The world title that came in from WCW, he held 3 times. And he defeated at WrestleMania 23 Batista for his first world title. Then he defeated for his second WrestleMania 24 against Edge. And Hell in a Cell 2009, he beat CM Punk. When he became the WWF/WWE champion, he mainly held the title under the WWF banner. At Survivor Series 1991, he defeated Hulk Hogan. WrestleMania 13, he defeated Psycho Sid. Over the Edge 1999, he defeated Steve Austin. And one of his last WWF title runs was Judgment Day 2002, where he took on Hulk Hogan. He was a one-time hardcore champion, and he won that at Vengeance in 2001 against RVD. He was a six-time WWF World Tag Team Champion, once with Steve Austin and against Kane and Mankind at Fully Loaded in 1998.
That was a good rivalry story there.
He held the titles twice with Big Show under the Unholy Alliance, where they took out X-Pac and Kane at SummerSlam 1999. Their second title run came at the result of the Rock and Sock Connection on SmackDown in 1999. He also held the tag titles with The Rock against Edge and Christian at Raw's War 2000. He also held the WWF tag titles and WCW tag titles with Kane, where they defeated Edge and Christian on SmackDown 2001, and then they defeated DDP and Canyon in the Steel Cage SummerSlam 2001. He won the Royal Rumble in 2007 at the number 30 spot. He, of course, is a 2022 Hall of Famer. He won the T-Walk Mountain Trophy in 2020. He won the WWF Championship #1 Contenders Tournament in April 2002. And he won WWE LFG Season 1. If you guys have not been staying up there with that, that new groundbreaking show he's a coach on. He has held a Slammy Award a total of 15 times. These accomplishments are very interesting to me. In 1994, he was the most intimidating he won an award for. In 1996, he won WWF's Greatest Hit, basically dragging Diesel down into the abyss in Your House, Rage in the Cage, which was an interesting pay-per-view nonetheless. And in 1997, he won 3 different awards: Best Entrance Music, Star of the Highest Magnitude, and the Best Tattoo. And one of the rivalries, he won Rivalry of the Year in 2015 against Brock Lesnar. In 2020, he won Moment of the Year, The Undertaker's Final Farewell at Survivor Series. And in 2020 as well, he won the WWE Network documentary for The Undertaker, The Last Ride. In 2011, he won the Oh My God Moment of the Year, kicking out of Triple H's Tombstone Piledriver at WrestleMania 27. 2010, Moment of the Year, he took on HBK in WrestleMania Career vs. Streak, which later won Match of the Year, which I'm about to get to. He won 5 Matches of the Year. WrestleMania 25 against HBK. WrestleMania 26 against HBK, Career vs. Streak. He won it in 2012 at WrestleMania 28, where it was Triple H versus Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell with the special guest referee being Shawn Michaels. In 2015, he took on Brock Lesnar in a Hell in a Cell, and his final match of the year was 2020 WrestleMania 36, the Boneyard match versus AJ Styles. And right there alone, and we could just say that Undertaker, even without all these accomplishments, Undertaker is an amazing talent and one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. Carrie, where would you like us to start now that we just went over that?
I mean, with all his accomplishments, it pales in comparison to the personal accomplishments that he has, you know, with the company, with the fans, with how he had overcome the odds of such a unique, let's say, gimmick from the beginning of a undead Western mortician and evolving with the times to stay relevant. You know, all those titles, those accolades, they're great and all, but to me, his greatest accomplishment is just how well known and respected he is by people who know even the slightest sliver of wrestling. You know, you could talk to a non-wrestling fan, and there's 3 names that they'll pop up for, technically, that they'll pop up with more often than not, and that's Hogan, Taker, Austin, and The Rock. You know, most everybody, wrestling fan or not, knows those 4 names. Okay. And so to be in that kind of alumni, you've had to have meant something. And look at the 4 names that I just listed. Taker outlasted every single one of them. And he didn't ever leave the company that made him for creative reasons, such as like Austin did, or to go pursue career in Hollywood, or that sort of thing, or even used politics as much as Hogan did. So there to me is a superstar above all superstars in Taker.
Shut up. Shut these doors.
Well said. Daryl, do you want to kind of get a good starting point for you as well? And do you also want to tell me what you told me the other day when it came to Undertaker holding championships? What is that you told me, if you remember what you said?
Bro.
Well, he was the guy that really didn't need a championship.
Exactly. How you kind of said, like, the reason that he was ever given a world title was that basically he was like the scapegoat guy.
Yeah, he was basically the in case of emergency break glass guy, because they knew that he would be able to carry the title, and if they didn't have anybody else to put the title on, they put it on the Undertaker because they knew he could carry it, and they knew he was legit and all that other kind of thing. And I get it. But he was there. There are people in wrestling. There were guys in wrestling that you think about that didn't really need a championship, like Scott Hall, Razor Ramon. They didn't really need like the top title. Arn Anderson didn't really need the top title. Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig didn't really need the top title. Undertaker, he really didn't need a He really didn't need a championship at all. He was an attraction himself.
Piper falls into that category.
Yeah, Piper, absolutely. Roddy Piper. Yeah.
Jake Roberts, he falls into that category. There's just certain superstars that hold their own prestige.
Yep.
You threw your toothbrush at the ghost.
And I think like with what AAA is doing now, Undertaker's literally beating the heck when it comes to like great content, beating Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and it's like, dude, Undertaker has a mind for the business, and he got to learn that, and he knows the craft in and out, wrestling or not. Like he knows what he's doing.
When he says old school, that's exactly what it is. He's old school. He knows what it takes to make it in the business. Triple H, Shawn Michaels, love them or hate them, doesn't matter. They have a mind for the business. And I'm gonna do a little hot take here. Taker right now, when I see him appear on the shows, that's not my Taker. That is not the Undertaker that loves the business. That's an Undertaker that is just doing what TKO says. He is not happy with the product. I can see it in his face. You could tell that he is not happy with what TKO is doing to the company that he helped shape in many, many ways. He goes out there, he's there for like a minute or two, and then he's gone, And I think part of that is so he can let the younger talent, the newer generation do their thing. But if you really look close to his face, there's a look of disgust there that was never there before.
Yeah.
And it's not a heel gimmick disgust. It's legit disgust.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Same reason. He probably feels a lot the same about it as I do.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are feeling pretty upset with TKO and what they've done to a business and superstars that we love. But let's not go on that tangent. That could be a whole other rant for a whole nother episode.
Yeah, this is about Undertaker and his fantastic career, and he's had a big career, as we've already discussed a bit about, and I'm excited to talk about his rivalries, some of his most infamous matches with you guys, like some great moments that stick out to you that may not just be matches, but like maybe stuff within matches where you're like, whoa, that really happened.
Yeah.
Daryl.
I'm sorry. Before I forget, I've got to ask you guys, his best theme song, Go, what was it for you guys?
Ooh. I'm gonna let Daryl take this one first.
I mean, you can't really beat the original. I mean, you can't really beat the original March of the Dead. That was just to have a sound. I feel like An important part of a wrestling entrance is to have a sound where if everybody knows it's you that's coming. So, like for instance, Steve Austin, the glass breaks, you know Steve Austin's coming. When the bell hit,
You knew it was dead, man.
you knew.
When you had that big explosion before the music ever happens, you knew it was Kane.
Yep.
Yeah.
You got to have a signature to your entrance. But yeah, I like the original and I like the American Badass. I like those two.
For me,
my number one will,
go ahead.
My
I'm
number one
sorry.
would have to be the 1990 original, like Daryl said, and like I like how it developed over time. But I'm also my second favorite would have to be Rollin' by that one, and I thought his first biker theme song was Rollin' was one of my favorites too. Yeah, those are my top two, and my third would have to be the one after in 2003, which was good. Yeah.
So I'm the oddball out here. His funeral dirge was great. Rest in peace, as it was called when it was first remixed. But to me, his theme from 1998, late 97, The Darkest Side, that is my favorite. You know, it really showed the first true evolution of the character and let us see more than just a Western mortician. There was something darker and deeper there, and I really, really loved the guitar in it, and it kept the signature bell toll, but then you had the choir come in with that Gregorian-style chant. It was just absolute. When I think about that song and I see Taker come down to that, I don't care what outfit he's in, to me that's Undertaker. I literally, so when Xbox 360 had the games where you could actually import music from your hard drive to use for the entrances, I would change Taker's entrance music, the classic Taker, to his 1998 theme. I literally had it downloaded just for that on my Xbox. Plus, it's just a great song to listen to. And it fit every time. I don't care which incarnation, the walk, everything was perfect, right down to the T every time it happened. And I get chills thinking about it. And anytime I hear that song, it's just, that's Taker to me.
And I believe it also had like three little girls like starting the chant at the beginning, right? Wasn't
No.
that?
That was when he first started out with the American Badass. That's when he first came in with Judgment Day. The girls would be, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray my soul is mine to keep. If I die before I wake, pray the Lord my soul to take.
Yeah.
Now back from the dead. And he's here now back from the dead. Then you hear a bell toll, and then it rang in American Badass.
Yeah,
but the one I'm talking about was pre-Ministry, but after the Dark Side remix.
Because before he had the Ministry, he had that song that you're talking about. And can we talk about something within his songs that I think we can all attest to? When a wrestler heard that gong, they knew they were in for something, because they literally, some of these wrestlers, how they played it off, they were legitimately scared of The Undertaker. Once you heard gong go off.
Wouldn't you be? You're sitting in the ring.
Dude, like, just like how they played it, Carrie, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you have to admire that when you hear that gong, you know that trouble's coming.
Mm-hmm. Whether it's a scripted beatdown or you're legit nervous in that ring going against somebody with that kind of aura, you hear that bell toll, you instinctively your ass clenches. All right, let's just call a spade. Your ass clenches. It's literally a grave toll.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dope. Yeah.
And I feel bad for some of those jobbers, but at the same time, we got to see Undertaker. He got put jobbers for a little bit, but then you could see him moving up. He literally won the WWF title, as me and Daryl were talking about the other day, within the first year, like within the second year of his career, because he debuted in 1990, but in 1991 at the Survivor Series, he won the WWF Championship. Like right there, just like, wow, he got pushed to the moon.
And he's one of the very few people that can say that they have beaten Hulk Hogan twice for the title in their career.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, and that goes back to what I was saying before. Hogan did a lot of politics, and you know, Taker,
There's a big difference.
he fell into one or two of Hogan's traps, but he let Hogan know that, hey, this ain't gonna happen like that. You know, you're gonna do right by the business.
And I'm keeping calm.
He's one of the few that would stand up to Hogan.
Do you know what the difference is?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why Bret Hart, when he left, literally made Taker leader of the locker room. Before it was Taker, it was Bret. Believe it or not.
No, it was. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Hey, the lowest temp I've got is 1.2.
And Daryl, talking about Undertaker with the locker room leading stuff and stuff like that with politics when it came to Hogan. Do you want to evaluate on that or anything else that sticks out to you when it came to Taker?
I'm trying to get you a message. I love the floor.
No, I had heard, you know, once kayfabe was broken and they started talking about all the backstage stuff and all that. I've always heard that Taker was a locker room leader and he was the judge for the wrestlers' court and all that kind of stuff and everything. And
very much so.
I mean, he strikes me. He strikes me anyway as someone who would be in a position like that. Just the way he talks, the way he carries himself, the way he respects the business. I don't see why somebody like that wouldn't be a locker room leader.
He's definitely the one I would want to go under the learning tree of if I was to get into wrestling. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Yep. It would be. That'd be great. Yeah.
And look at the guys' careers that he's helped develop over time, like with certain individuals, like Kane, for instance. Like Kane was nervous to work with the Undertaker because he's also working at that time. You remember he interfered at the end, near basically the end of the match between him and Shawn Michaels, two big names at that time, and he walks in with Paul Bearer, and then you see the Undertaker have emotion for the first time, like he's actually stunned.
Without that look of disbelief, like he had just seen a ghost, you know, I feel like Kane's debut would have fallen flat. I don't care how cool it looked with him ripping the door off of the hinges, quote unquote, of the cell. You know, without Taker being a master class in knowing how important this was for Glenn. And how important it was for the story and the characters. If he did not show the first time Taker actually being stunned, like legit, oh my freaking God, he was telling the truth, that I know who's behind that mask. You know, without that, it would have never worked. It would have been another, I hate to say it, Glenn, if you're listening or ever watch this, I know you hate people talking about it. It's just been another Christmas creature failure.
Oh yeah, if Undertaker hadn't put that over like he did, it wouldn't have lasted. I have trouble with supernatural gimmicks. I mean, Undertaker is probably the only supernatural gimmick I ever really accepted for what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if it hadn't been for him, I don't think that would. And Kane was, not to get off the subject of the Undertaker, but Kane was that gimmick for Glenn Jacobs was like his last chance.
Yeah,
it really was.
That was either going to work. That was either going to work, or he was going to be wherever he went after that.
Yeah.
And it definitely worked, and we'll definitely get more into that as we go on. But since we are on the subject talking about Undertaker, I think we do need to take it back to the very beginning of his debut when we all knew Ted DiBiase. It was him with Rhythm and Blues, Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine versus the Hart Foundation, Dusty Rhodes, and Coco Beware. Now, he said he had a fourth partner, and when he introduced them, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you the Undertaker." And then you see him walk out with Brother Love, and people are literally scared. Like, kids in the crowd are like shocked because of how tall.
Yeah.
Take a look at the size of that ham hock, Rowdy Piper said at commentary, which was infamous. And right there, how he did that slow walk, and you hear that music going with it. You see like no emotion from this man, and this was at a time that kayfabe was big, so people legitimately were scared of this guy. He walks down to that ring, and I believe he eliminated three, if not two people from the team, and then he got disqualified. He got disqualified was the way to get him out. He did not get pinned. He got disqualified or something, if I recall.
Yeah, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he got out both Coco Ware and Dusty Rhodes in that match. Saving Hart Foundation for the other teams. But that match showed what a promising prospect Taker was, even in his early years of that gimmick. That slow walk. Nobody else had that. That undead stiffness, nobody had that. And then shortly afterwards, where he was, I believe, choking, was a Big Boss Man in the corner, and he rolled his eyes back. He admitted he just did it, you know.
Yep.
And, nobody had ever seen anything like that. And it, just like you said, Eddie, kids legit were hiding behind their parents when Taker was walking out. So when people would say the arena drops temperature just from seeing him, I believe it. It's that psychology that he carried with him.
Yeah, that is very true. And Daryl, you want to talk about Undertaker's first time around in WWE and maybe what your reaction was and such?
Well, I can't really talk a lot about when he first showed up in the WWE because, like I said, I wasn't really watching it back then.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen tape and I've seen footage since then of it and everything, but I just recall that it was what I like heels. I like heels regardless. I've always liked the bad guy better than I've liked the good guy. It didn't matter if it was He-Man, G.I. Joe, whatever it was. The bad guys always had the cooler shit. But The Undertaker was a different kind of bad guy. He wasn't loud. He wasn't boisterous. He wasn't, his movements were methodical. He was slower. He was way different. And I think that's another thing that helped him get over as much as he did. I mean, just as the fact is a phenomenal gimmick, and I mean, Jim Cornette has even said that nobody else could have got that gimmick over except for Mark. And
I'm inclined to believe him, and that's saying a lot because I hate Cornette.
I don't necessarily hate Cornette. I like listening. I like listening to Cornette because he'll talk about things, and I bet, man, I remember that happening. So I get to remember what I remember seeing, and then I get to hear the other side of it as he's talking about it. I don't hate Cornette. I hated him when I was younger because I was a kid and I didn't like Cornette, and my grandmother didn't like Cornette either. But but he was different. He was way different. There had never been anybody like him in wrestling before, as far as that gimmick and all that went. Man, he was a big
While you're
deal.
getting sound recordings, I'm going to start working on
I want to ask you guys a what if in the early years. What if the stars aligned just right and Taker had somewhat aligned with a dark heel Doink played by the original Doink? What would you guys think of that?
Matt Bourne, we're talking, of course, the original Doink.
Yeah,
Nobody played better. with how it was back in the day, especially, I feel like it would have been a very interesting duo, especially at that time with like all the characters you had coming in. Because at a time, even though Undertaker was like the darkest thing on there, a
We
lot
need
of
a
their
photo
stuff
of that girl.
catered or tried to cater to children. But you could tell that there were certain gimmicks, especially when Doink turned heel, like that really,
Bringing it.
like
Hold
some
on.
kids were legitimately crying and like scared of clowns. And clowns are like a common thing to be scared of in like a lot of places. I've talked to a lot of people. There are people that I know that are scared of clowns, and when I've shown them Doink, they're like, turn it off, turn it off. I'm scared of Doink. And I'm like, but he's just a cool clown. He's like, nope, just turn it off. But I feel like it would
That
have
was
been an interesting pairing.
that's kind of my point. You know, you had two of the biggest fears right there materialized in wrestling: death and clowns, right? And then if Jake was still there, snakes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it would have been very interesting, I think, and if done right, could have went somewhere. Maybe, you know, instead of the slapstick, we could have gotten a more Joker-esque Doink, like from Matt Bourne. You know, because he already was kind of twisted up in the head, as it was. So if you had ever gotten those two together under the tutelage of Bearer or even Ted DiBiase, had Bearer not come in, could you imagine what could have happened with that?
That would. Daryl, do you actually want to speak on this? What you thought if that would have happened?
No, you
Well,
got two. Now,
I ain't never really cared for
you just
the
need
whole
to get
Doink thing. I don't. It's got nothing to do with being afraid of clowns. I didn't. I don't know. There's places and times for things, and I don't know if I feel like professional wrestling is necessarily the place and the time for a clown. And the whole thing was back when I was younger. Another reason, even when it got to where I could watch the WWF, I didn't watch WWF because if I wanted to watch cartoons, I just watch cartoons. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if there was a way to make Doink like not so much the colorful clown and get him darker and get him a little more evil and menacing, because Matt Bourne could have done it. Matt Bourne could have pulled it off. At one point in his career, they called him Maniac Matt Bourne. They could have.
I could see it.
They could have. He could have pulled it off. So yeah, it probably could have worked a lot better than I'm giving it credit for. Yeah, it's just ruined by it being that kind of clown to start with when he first came in. But yeah, if they could have turned him around and got him like really, really dark and really, really menacing and like switched up the face paint and everything to make him scarier and all that kind of stuff, yeah, I could see it working. Yeah, I could see it working.
Like a Buried Alive match leading into that kind of alliance would have probably done wonders, because more or less a resurrection of a new Doink, more or less.
Yeah, that would have been dope. That could have been dope. Yeah, because you would have buried him and then you would have had him resurrected into a okay, I'm feeling it. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
That grub wasn't out yet.
So, how you brought up Maniac Matt Bourne, I was thinking of what if it was almost like Born Again Matt Bourne, who was a legit lunatic in those later years. I thought that would have. I don't know how that would have worked out, but like, do you think that might have worked out if Maniac Matt Bourne didn't work out?
Get out of the truck.
I don't think Born Again Matt would have worked with that time and era of Taker. But if you had Matt Bourne tag with Mankind of that era, which we'll definitely talk about the rivalry of Taker and Mankind, that could have worked.
Okay. I hear that. And as we were talking about his Undertaker's fantastic debut, I think we need to go into the next part of it regarding, so he originally had Brother Love for a bit as his manager. Now, when you look at it, it's kind of like a weird pairing, but like I guess they wanted to put him with a manager to keep that mystique to the Undertaker. But then we had the Brother Love show where the infamous thing happened. So now in the back, man, mind you, Hawk, they were trying to figure out a name for Paul Bearer. How about Paul Bearer? And then in the Brother Love show, he's like, He was like, because in real life, Bruce Pritchard, who played Brother Love, needed to do more stuff backstage. So he replaced him with Paul Bear. But then he's like, I present to you, Brother Bearer. And then you see Paul coming in looking like Gomez Adams from the Addams Family with his head down at first. And then he goes up to the mic and then he's like, like when Brother Love says, what is your first name? Paul. What better man to guide the career of the Undertaker than Brother Paul Bearer? And right there, we saw a beginning of something great because Undertaker had a mouthpiece. So Undertaker could keep that mystique, but still say them one-liners as we were talking about. Now, going into that, Daryl, I'm actually going to start with you for this one, if you don't mind. When it came to Paul Bear with the Undertaker, how did you feel about that alliance?
I mean, it made sense. The whole thing made sense. The look made sense. The name made sense. You have Undertaker and you have Paul Bearer. I mean, two things you got to have for a funeral: an Undertaker and some Paul Bearers. So, I mean, yeah, it all made sense. It all made sense to me. Paul Bearer, man, Percy Pringle.
You're not.
I've been watching Percy since the Territory days. So
Yep.
yeah, he was good, man. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves a lot of the time either.
Agreed. And he was a real life mortician. Also worked for it as well. So
to get away.
Yep.
At that, it just made the Undertaker and him it was like a match made in heaven, as they would say. Harry, you want to talk about Paul Bear and Undertaker?
You just make it go.
Yeah, with Paul Bearer, my mother absolutely hated Paul because of his voice, that "oh yes" sort of thing, and I thought it was perfect, you know. And even at a young age where I didn't comprehend death, when I saw Taker, I knew Paul Bearer was the one to come out with Taker. I knew the urn had the power of the Undertaker, and when every now and then, when Taker seemed to be going out of Paul's control, Paul would reach up and grab his hair and pull him back. Like, no, there's a time and place for it, you know. And Taker would submit to Paul, and you know, much like a zombie or a thrall would submit to its master, more or less. So when you think about that, Paul Bearer could have potentially been the most powerful manager of that era. You know, you had your Ted DiBiase's with his $1 million belt. What can you do with the $1 million belt? Well, you can strike somebody with it. But here you have this supernatural force that is seemingly impervious to pain and only knows one way: through you. You know, you have this being that only you can control. It's literally a weapon of destruction. And Paul would use that line later when referring to Kane. You are my personal instrument of destruction. And he did that for Taker for many, many years. Paul, even in his early years, you felt was slimy, sadistic. There was something underneath that voice and that appearance that you would detest. And that's what made this work. You had such a dangerous and sadistic manager with the ability to control a force that is beyond natural comprehension. How do you combat something like that in the world of professional wrestling? Or even just naturally in the world, how do you combat something like that? It's literally like you have a walking demon beside you that you could just call upon anytime somebody pisses you off.
Yeah, it's
And
pretty dope.
when you talk about control as well, do you remember? I think you probably do remember, both of you. The urn became a symbol of like the Undertaker, like how he would react to that urn when Paul Bear would hold
Yes.
that up. Do you want to talk about that, Kerry? I figured you were going to go into that next when it came to the urn. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk?
Like
Yeah.
I said, it was literally a symbol of power and submission for Taker at the same time. When Paul would raise the urn, Taker would sit up no matter how much he got beat down. Yoko could have hit him with 3 bonsai drops and still he would sit up. Nobody has ever done that before. Even Hulk Hogan submitted to 2 bonsai drops, you know. So somebody like the immortal Hulk Hogan being outshined by Taker, just it's a force that keeps coming. And then if an opponent knocked Paul aside and got the urn, we would watch and see Taker weaken because that wasn't the holder of the urn. You know, when and we'll touch on it later, I'm sure. When Men on a Mission melted down the urn to make a chain, for a while, Taker struggled with winning matches with the power of the urn. And then way later, they circled back to the power of the urn when Taker had been in the Comatose storyline when they revisited the Kane and Taker rivalry. And who was it that Undertaker was able to draw his power from again? It was Paul Bearer and the urn. And when CM Punk was in the rivalry with Taker shortly after Williams' passing, the urn became the centerpiece for that WrestleMania, and the disrespect that Punk was putting on Paul Bearer, you know, that urn became an immortal object, so to speak, to Taker, as if it wasn't already. It meant more than when William was managing Taker. So that urn is just as symbolic to the Taker as anything, in my opinion.
Also, when you were talking about the urn being melted down, I thought it was Kama that melted it down into a chain.
It might have been, but Men on the Mission was with Kama and Ted DiBiase at the time.
But Men in a really? Because I thought Kama, he was part of the $1 Million Corporation when Ted DiBiase is why he was there. Viscera was doing his thing as Mabel and King Mabel with Mo being like his manager.
He was going to catch you.
There may have been a loose alliance there, but I do know that they were somewhat working together here and there. I know Kama was mostly the one behind it, but every now and then you would see Mo or somebody come out to help Kama with getting the chain back. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So there was some kind of alliance there.
Okay.
But you were right to correct me. It was Kama who melted it down, but Men on a Mission did have their play in it.
Yes, okay. Because I know that we also will be talking about the Mabel story as well with the whole broken nose mask Undertaker when we get there. But Daryl, I do want to go into you with this one. Now, we already talked about Hulk Hogan taking the WWF title from Hulk Hogan at Survivor Series just a year after his debut. And I do want to take a minute to welcome Katie, just sipping on and watching with some soda. Welcome, Katie. Welcome, Fat Squirrel and Ritik. Welcome, gentlemen. But after holding that title, do you think that he was like literally known as like the biggest threat in that locker room? Like people have to step up. This man literally got pushed a year after, and there was probably guys that have been there longer than him that were jealous of that. But look what he did within a short period.
Little black one.
Yeah, I feel like that was probably a wake-up call for a lot of people. When you potentially think about all the people that were there, I mean, Flair was there when that happened. Flair was there, Savage was there. Razor Ramon was in the WWF at that time. I believe Razor was in there. I believe Scott was there at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of people that probably felt like there was a lot of toes that were probably felt like they were stepped on. But I mean, just to see somebody rise that quick. I mean, you knew though. I mean, when you have generational talents and generational gimmicks, and the Undertaker was one of them. He just happened to be able to carry it on for so long because I don't even know, man. It's crazy to think that particular gimmick. Because I mean, he was still the Undertaker, regardless if he was a biker or if he was this or if he was that. It was still the Undertaker, and it's just amazing to think. It's just amazing to think, to last that long in one gimmick. Because if you really think about it, like Triple H he's been Triple H, but he hasn't been the same Triple H throughout his career.
Yes.
He's been, he was Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and then he was this and that and the third and all that. And people change their gimmicks and even change their names over and over again just to keep themselves relevant. Undertaker never really did that. He changed the way he looked. He was still the Undertaker.
That'll be there in a minute.
Yeah. And he had like a really it was like a brief moment, but I think you guys remember this. He was Kane the Undertaker, but we all knew him as just the Undertaker. So I feel like Kane the Undertaker just was like one of those things like they quietly dropped and they were like, okay, people are calling him the Undertaker. No need for that first name. But
yeah, I think I recall seeing video of I believe it was Mean Gene said it like one time. This man Kane the Undertaker. And I don't know if it was ever said again after that.
No, Kane, the Undertaker, literally was just a house show and maybe a Shotgun Saturday Night or whatever Saturday night show that they had at the time where Gene was hosting. It literally lasted maybe 2-3 undercard shows where he first came in. After that, they just dropped Kane completely. But Bruce kept in the back of his mind, hey, Kane, that's a good name. Plus, he even mentioned that he just loved the name Kane altogether. And yep. So, and they repurposed Kane for, Taker's brother later. So it worked out. It worked out in Taker's favor. Most people don't remember him as Kane the Undertaker. Otherwise, if they did, they'd be like, how are you going to have two sons named Kane,
Yeah.
That storyline would have fallen flat before it even got started. But yeah, you were right. It was Kane the Undertaker in the very, very early beginnings, but it did not last very long at all. And I think somewhere I had heard that it was just too long of a name to keep saying for entrances, so they just dropped Kane and put The Undertaker, which has a better ring to it anyway.
Yep. Exactly. I agree with that because it's like when you think about it, if I was to announce Kane, the Undertaker, compared to the Undertaker, like that sounds more of like a pop you'll get, like that name is like scary. And like as we were talking about at the beginning, children were scared. Adults, I think, were almost shitting themselves when they saw this man. So, yeah.
I mean, there was an interview or two, or at least a moment in the last ride. Taker literally said that people legit thought he was a real dead man.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how good he was with that gimmick. And I agree when they say there's nobody on earth who could pull that gimmick off, except for Mark.
Exactly. And we're definitely going to talk about the development of Undertaker as we go on, because I think we all can attest he has a very interesting development when it came to his dead man gimmick, as we'll talk about, because he had to keep the dead man alive. But as Daryl stated, he was always the dead man throughout all his personas. No matter if he was the American Badass, he was still called the dead man. No matter if he was the Lord of Darkness, he was still called the dead man. And I want to take a minute to see what KD said here. He said, Undertaker will always be the GOAT no matter what. He has been my fave since I was 3 years old. Undertaker legacy never dies. That is very true, Katie. And welcome Billy Ann Wolf. She is a pro wrestling announcer. She has a far career, and I want to see her go big places in the future. And welcome Chris King. But as we go forward talking about Taker and such, what rivalry should we talk about? One of his earliest rivalries, if you guys want to say where to start.
When you say early, like how early do we want to go with
Like
this?
one of his first rivalries, because there's quite a few he's had, but when he after he won the WF title, going into which route should we talk about? Jake Roberts, I think that would have been one of his earliest, right?
It was, and that's the one I was going to suggest, but I don't remember if it was before or after he won the title. I believe it was after he won the title.
It was after, because WrestleMania 7 came later. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So that's the one I would want to talk about. With that one, it was so interesting, the elements put in, because you had two sides of the same coin. You had darkness from Jake and darkness from Taker. It just exactly what was going on with those two. Why did Taker turn? Why did he stop, Jake from nailing Miss Elizabeth? Because they were embroiled with that sort of feud. When you thought of Taker and Jake, they took out the Ultimate Warrior of all people, right? And during that time, the Ultimate Warrior was the Hulk Hogan of the time. That was the one man that you didn't cross, was the Ultimate Warrior. And they literally brought out the darkness in Ultimate Warrior. I don't know if y'all have seen the storyline leading up to that with Warrior, but when they sealed Warrior in the coffin, by the time they got Warrior out, he sat up like Taker, and he had that dark look in his eyes like Taker would have. And it took Jake and Taker to do that to the Warrior. Have y'all known anybody else to do that to Ultimate Warrior?
Like what they did to him specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of people keep down Warrior.
Bring out a darkness within Ultimate Warrior.
Nobody, because after that, I feel like we all can attest that he went on to go do stuff with Hulk Hogan and Savage, who never really brought out that side of him. So Undertaker and Jake were the only two. Daryl, could you think of anybody? I think he's correct. Those are the only two.
I mean, I don't know. Papa Shango made him throw up black shit, so maybe he made him get rid of it.
But didn't actually make Warrior turn dark is what I'm getting at.
No, it was just them.
Yeah. So why would Taker turn on Jake when they were two sides of the same coin? It was a very, very interesting rivalry, and I don't think we got a definitive answer. It was just one of those things where, I guess what little conscience Taker had at the time wouldn't allow Jake to strike Elizabeth. He could care less about Savage, but why turn on somebody who is literally your kith and kin in the darkness category at that time? So to me, there wasn't a definitive conclusion to that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Logically, would Taker beat Jake if Jake's demons and alcoholism hadn't got the better of him? I could have potentially seen that story continue, because Jake was not one to take a loss like that. Jake was not one to be outdone in darkness, and yet here Taker was literally outclassed him in everything. He kicked out of the DDT, which was something that nobody really did much. So not only did he outdark Jake, he made Jake's lethal move look like child's play. And you just didn't do that to Jake Roberts' moves.
Also,
The
did you put a book down?
DDT when Jake Roberts did it was one of the most protected finishing
What the hell
moves in
is it?
wrestling. So for anybody to kick out of it, it would be a big. It was like the Dudley Death Drop. For the longest time, nobody ever kicked out of the 3D. And
Exactly.
I don't think people should kick out of finishing moves. It's called a finishing move for a reason, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty big deal. I don't know what could have come of it or how you really. I don't know how you would go about putting Jake Roberts over the Undertaker. I don't really know how. I honestly, looking at it, if you want to like take the scope of the gimmick and everything in about it, I don't know how you put anybody over the Undertaker as far as that goes. It's hard to wrap my mind around. This is
Where's that other cross? I'm not going to ask again. I'm not going to die.
I guess for lack of a better way to put it, he was like a force of darkness, and there wasn't really anybody else. They tried to do. I think they were going to try to do some stuff with this dude. They were called this dude called Malachi for a little while, but then he fizzled out and nothing happened with him.
Yeah. It was supposed to be played by Kevin Thorne.
Yeah, Kevin
Mordecai.
Thorne. Mordecai. Yeah. But I don't know, man. It's hard to figure. I've always wondered, and I'm getting a little ahead of it and a little off subject about it. But like when the Boogeyman showed up, what would have ever happened if the Boogeyman and the Undertaker ran into each other? I mean, who do you? I mean, the Undertaker's not going to be afraid of the Boogeyman, and the Boogeyman is not supposed to be afraid of anybody. So how do you book that match? How does that work? I think what happens is that you can't have too many of the same kind of gimmick at the same time. And that's probably I don't know if Jake and I like Jake. Jake was one of my favorite wrestlers, even though I wasn't paying attention to WWF like that back then. Jake was one of my favorite wrestlers because he seemed more like a guy. He seemed more like a dude that I might run into walking down the street. That's why I liked NWA and USWA and all that better. These people look like people that would just fight it.
Out in the truck. People alone.
I don't know if I don't know. I think it ended the best way it could have as far as that went.
Okay.
Maybe, but
yeah, I was about to say, Kerry, it sounded like you were going to say something. What were you going to say?
Jake's gimmick at the time was a dark gimmick. He was that venomous, underhanded, sneaky, evil guy that you just wouldn't come across. Yes, it was true. He was a mortal guy, but he was at that time the embodiment of evil in humanity, like the sneakiest and darkest of the dark humanity had to offer, hence Jake the Snake Roberts. So, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if Jake's alcoholism and demons hadn't got the better of him, that could have been a story that was on up there in proportions to Kane and Taker. I really do.
Well said.
Yeah, I could see that. I just don't know how you would go about ending that story to where it didn't hurt whoever it was. And I don't know. I don't think it would have been Jake going over the Undertaker. So
no, I don't think Taker would have. I don't think Jake would have went over, but there could have definitely been a much better and longer story to have been told. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get that. I get what you're saying. I'm just saying is I don't know how you end it without it hurting Jake. Like if it were to be the flip side, you say, okay, well maybe Jake would go over the Undertaker. I don't know how you would end that without it hurting the Undertaker. As far as that went, it was It could have been a longer story, but as far as there being like the definitive end like you're looking for, I don't even know if you could have done that, and it preserved the legacies of either one of them as far as their gimmicks and their characters and whatnot go. I don't see how you finish that one and it sitting well with as far as wrestling. I don't know. That's an interesting one.
Hence why I said it's an unfinished rivalry and unfinished story.
Yeah, yep.
And I do hate to point out, like, I think we all know this, though, and as Kerry did point out, Jake was dealing with problems outside the ring, and that's kind of what did cost him at times with certain things. So maybe the reason that they did that, I don't know if this is true, but maybe it was like in the long run type of things. Maybe they felt like they really couldn't rely on Jake for those things, because there was a point, as I've talked about before, I believe I've talked about this before with you, Perry, and I know I've talked about it with Daryl. He was going to become the WWF champion against Warrior, but Warrior fucked it up for him, and who knows, that put Jake down more of a rabbit hole still, and he was already doing stuff like already, and that really did not help anything. But Jake, maybe they were looking at it in the long run. Jake put over The Undertaker at WrestleMania on his second match for his streak, and right there, I believe would have to be like where the end of their rivalry came. But Jake, like we all stated, and as we all know, he was not doing well outside the ring.
No, Jake's contract was up with WWE at the time too, and he was going to leave again. Though that just kind of leaves a unfinished story. There's so much more that could have been told there with the Taker and Jake rivalry. That's where I'm going with that whole thing.
Yeah, that's why I was like trying to say, like, who knows? Maybe they were thinking about it in the long run, you know. And if you were to book it, Kerry, how would you have booked the rest of that if you had to say? If it went longer.
Okay. If it went longer, like let's do the common three match rivalries. Let's do it that way. So Taker gets the first one at WrestleMania, you know, typical match, right?
Yeah.
So then we have a very vindictive, very dangerous Jake, even more dangerous than usual, who just can't get out of his own head about how Taker literally betrayed him and then made him look like a joke at WrestleMania, kicking out of his move. What could be the one thing that Jake could have done to turn that in his favor? Turn my attention to Paul Bearer. Find a way to disable Paul and the urn. So let's go back to what Jake was known for, bringing out snakes, using venom, using underhanded tactics. He used snakes and venom from snakes literally to, storyline-wise, paralyze Warrior to get him in the coffin. He could have done the same for Paul Bearer, and then he could have done away with the urn, like literally buried Paul with the urn in a place that Taker had no way to get to, thus sapping Taker's power and showing the world Taker's really just a man underneath all that. We could have given the second match a casket match for Taker, and then to mess with Taker's psyche as Jake, the coffin, when it's first opened, like, you know, Taker would be the first one to open the coffin because he would have thrown around Jake a lot, okay? You know, Taker's angry, he's wanting to know where Paul is.
Got it.
So he opens up the casket, and who's laying in the casket? Paul Bearer. He reaches for the urn, and a snake strikes at him, stopping him from getting the urn, hence Jake coming in and literally nailing Taker with a DDT, and maybe not even just one, but 3 DDTs in a row, very biblical. 3 days it took for Christ to rise. 3 DDTs to put down the undead, slam the coffin down. There's a victory for Jake. Fast forward a couple months later, both Taker and Paul rise from the dead like they always did, come back and bury the snake in a buried alive match scenario.
Okay.
What? So, Daryl, when you were talking about how you felt about that, like how it would have ended for both men, do you like what Carrie said? Do you think that that story would have been good if they would have continued?
Spirit box. We have them Roy.
Yeah, I'd watch that. Yeah, that's pretty dope. I watched that. I never really thought about that as far as that went. But yeah, the whole Undertaker, the whole urn, the Paul Bearer, and all that stuff, and then Jake Roberts would probably go after Paul Bearer.
Yeah.
And then yeah, absolutely, yeah. Good work, man. Good work. I like that.
I usually say it as a joke, but I truly believe that I could have made a great writer in WWF or WWE.
I think a lot of us with the mind of the business, like, we would be the ones who would help save WWE with our minds, like, if we wanted to. And especially back in the day, it would have been nice to pick our brains then. And you two were born within these, like, eras. Now, me, I've always stated, I was not born in the era that you guys were. I was born in 2002, but I know my knowledge enough from back in the day to tell you stuff from the carnival days. And I'm a guy that respects the classics of like an Undertaker, Jake Roberts. Jake Roberts, one of the greatest speakers and wrestlers of all time. He was also a master of mind games. When you talk about dirtiest players in the game, Jake is up there in that category. Way better than Flair. But we also know
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Jake does not get the recognition he deserves, but this episode is for Taker, not Jake. But in my opinion, you can't have Taker without Jake, because Jake mentored and tutored Taker.
Exactly. And there's a lot of people that we'll talk about as we go on that helped Undertaker and who Undertaker helped out. And I think we did cover the Jake Roberts rivalry. Now, I think it is safe to say we can move on to another great rivalry from back in the day, Yokozuna. Now, Yokozuna, one of the biggest wrestlers that literally was referred to moving as a cruiserweight. The wars that him and Undertaker had, astounding. Just absolutely astounding. And Daryl, I know that you were not big on WWF, but I know we have talked about The Undertaker and Yoko and such. What would you have to say was like, so when you see those two men on paper, what was your thoughts and like seeing them two from what you have seen probably today in like clips and matches and stuff?
Well, I would wonder the same thing. I would wonder about anybody facing Yokozuna. Like, what are you gonna do with this guy?
Yeah,
I mean, professional wrestlers are very, very physically strong people and whatnot. But I mean, this is a 500+ pound man. It just seems like I don't know. I don't know who I would have thought should have beaten Yokozuna anyway, because it's just wrapping my mind around someone really being able to do much more to him than just do a bunch of striking and running around and all that kind of thing. What else do you do with a guy like that? And the Undertaker's game was more of a power game, very slow, methodical power game. Well, right off top, Undertaker takes the power game away from most anybody. Yeah, what do you do with him? I don't know what you do with him. He's big.
Yeah. And I know Carrie and I did talk. I think Carrie will remember as I talked about before he gets to talk about this rivalry. Carrie, do you remember the moment where Undertaker was being taken out by all them heels by the casket, and then he appeared on the Titantron? Do you want to talk about that and also talk about the rivalry between him and Yoko, one of the great classics of back in the day?
Okay, so before I actually get into the rivalry, we need to talk about the behind the scenes with Yoko and Taker, because behind the scenes, they were great friends. And,
Exactly.
you know, Taker has said this many times, and I believe that in order to have a great rivalry and performance, you have to have a great relationship with your opponent, first and foremost.
And he was begging Vince to work with him. He was begging Vince to work with him.
Yes. Taker saw something in Yoko. They both saw money in their matches. Because, let's face it, Taker is the one guy. All right, let's go back to the infamous match of Giant Gonzalez versus Taker at WrestleMania.
Yes.
All right. This happened before the Yoko rivalry, obviously. Before Yoko and Taker's rivalry, there was nobody who could stand up to Giant Gonzalez, and yet we see this supernatural man in The Undertaker take out Giant Gonzalez. You know, Gonzalez with Bobby Heenan literally used... Was it Bobby Heenan that was with him managing? I don't know. But he used chloroform. He used chloroform to incapacitate Taker, and Taker came back from that, literally from the back. Not only did he come back, but he seemed to come back stronger because he choked out Giant Gonzalez and knocked him down and everything. So you have this supernatural strength, phenomenal being. Because at this point, you completely wonder, is Taker even human at this point? He's literally a superhuman machine. And the only other person who they even said in commentary was seemingly superhuman or immortal was Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan and Yoko had a rivalry. So, and Yoko ended up doing away with Hogan. How do you stop Yoko now? Send the Undertaker after him. Undertaker is literally an unstoppable force. And he was one of those that Yoko actually, in character, feared. Because, you know, everybody fears death. Even somebody as big as Yoko. You fear death.
Well, it was 1,200, but this time
So,
I got my daily
with that in mind, you had the supernatural strength, the fear of death, and the psychology all playing against Yoko. But then Yoko's got his brute strength and speed a guy his size shouldn't have. So, in his own right, he's a bit of a superhuman as well. It's only natural that these two would eventually have a confrontation. So they did right by that, I feel like. And the only way to protect Taker was to do what they did, send him out in the coffin with all those other people aiding Yoko, more or less, under Mr. Fuji's pay, whatever. And I was right. I did recently do some research, and Bradshaw was there. It was Bradshaw. He was the long-haired guy in a cowboy hat and vest. So Bradshaw was part of that group that helped take Taker out.
Might have been. He was Justin Hawk Bradshaw, one of the new Blackjacks at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or that new Blackjacks.
Yeah, and Brandon, bless his heart, he was like, I don't think it was. Yes, it was.
But you have to think around that time, I believe I sent you something where he was not there because it was literally before he joined, because he was up in Japan at that time. So
he was probably still in development, but he was one of the people out there to aid, is my point. I knew I had seen him. But we're not going to go back on there. So in a sense, I guess we were both right.
But also, we do also have to remember how you brought up Yoko's friendship with Undertaker outside the ring. They have this thing called the Bone Street Crew, and Undertaker has stated a lot of people think it was just Undertaker that started that, but it was literally both him and Yoko. With how much Yoko, he was one of the most genuine guys. And Undertaker loved Yoko, mentioned him in his speech in the Hall of Fame, and when he passed, I know Undertaker was really upset at that.
Godfather was there too in the formation of the Bone Street Crew.
Yes.
So
the Godwins were members. Brian Adams, aka Crush. Yes, Savio Vega.
Yeah, Savio Vega was with
Savio. Yeah.
She said she'd be on in an hour.
Yeah.
It was an hour and a half ago.
Beautiful group. All legends too.
Yeah, and they wasn't really wanting to be known as a clique, so to speak, but they were there to keep the clique in line for the stories to be told, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard some things like some people said that, like, I understand the clique had influence. Some people said that the Bone Street Crew had influence, but not as much as the clique. But at the same time, Undertaker was like the big, as we stated, the big locker room leader. But when Yoko, we have to remember he was a part of the Samoan dynasty that played a Japanese sumo wrestler. So he was also a member of the family that Vince really cared for. He had a very close relationship with the wild Samoans and all of them, and he loved them. And he loved Yoko as if he was, I would say, almost like a nephew, if not like a son. He trusted Yoko. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I believe Taker has his own underlying respect for the Anoa'i family as well, because of Yoko.
Yes. Rikishi was also a member of the Bone Street Crew. I forgot about that as well. He was a member.
Yeah. Yep.
Which I believe at the time when it was first made, Rikishi was under the name the Sultan.
Yes, and then he later became Fatu, and then later became. He was actually a member of the. He was also a member of the Headstringers too. I remember too, and then we all know what happened.
Samu and Fatu.
Samu and Fatu. Yeah, the Headstringers.
Mm-hmm. Because remember, Yoko was supposed. I know that we're supposed to be talking about Undertaker, but there's things that I'm just remembering. He was supposed to be. Yoko was supposed to be in his spot, but then he got injured from an infection, so Rikishi went in that spot. But then that was like, okay, Yoko is now doing this new character. But then how over he got, because you saw kids in the crowd look at him and be like, wow, look at the size of this guy. Goes out there, does what he does. Woo! Impressive.
Yeah, and you know, like I said before, Yoko, he had a speed all his own. There was, once he got rolling, there was no stopping him. Much like Andre, you wasn't going to slam Yoko unless he wanted you to.
Exactly.
And he trusted Taker enough to take care of him, to let him have that rub from time to time, and to be able to kick out of his bonsai drop, which rarely anybody ever did.
Yes. Oh yeah. With how over that move got. Yeah.
When he hit the bonsai, you know it was over. You know. Let's not pretend it wasn't. Even Bull Nakano used it a little bit.
Yeah. Bull Nakano was a beast in her own right, and I hope we can talk about that one day, because I know she's one of your favorites. I hope we can actually have an episode about that for you. But yeah, Yoko and Undertaker's rivalry, one of the greatest, if not one of the greatest in like WWE at that time, WWF. Very infamous rivalry too that helped both men. They had the casket match. They had other matches, and they faced mainly at the big 4 pay-per-views a lot of the time, if I recall.
They did.
Because they had a Royal Rumble match at the Royal Rumble, and one at Survivor Series, I believe.
Yeah. So Eddie, that was your rivalry of choice. What about you, Darren? What is your rivalry with Taker choice? Early years.
Well, I've just talked about rivalries. It's just one up there. I mean, I could give you a top 10, but we'll talk about that another day. But that's just up there with one of the best.
As far as the rivalries I really remember and I was really watching,
Like early Taker rivalry. That's what Eddie wanted us to answer.
Well, we were also just
yeah.
going through the rivalries in general. So.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, an early Undertaker rivalry. I really couldn't talk in a lot of depth about a lot of early Undertaker rivalries because I wasn't really watching WWE. But as far as the ones when I was really watching, I don't know. Probably Steve. I mean, probably as stereotypical as it probably would be to say, probably Steve Austin. I mean, he crucified Steve Austin and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, that was a that was a pretty interesting one for a little bit.
okay.
Everybody he was everybody he was ever in a that's the thing about Undertaker. Like everybody he was ever in a rivalry with is pretty legendary. And I don't know if it's necessarily. I mean, I don't even. I'm not even gonna say I don't know if it's necessarily because it was him. It had to be because he's the common denominator in all of them. They were in.
Yep.
They were in a rivalry with the Undertaker, and as far back as you watch the Undertaker, you can pick out any of those matches and any of those rivalries and say, yeah, that was pretty dope. Yeah, that was pretty dope. And I mean, the shit he did with Triple H was pretty dope. The shit he did with Kane was pretty fucking dope. It's hard to pick out just one because like every single thing he did was, I mean, pretty much every single thing the man did was gold. So it's hard to pick out one in particular. As far as ones that I liked, probably the rivalry with Mankind.
I was about to say, if we're going to talk about rivalries in general now, we can't not talk about Taker and Mankind's rivalry.
We will be talking about that when we get there. As I was doing is because we talked about Jake, we were talking about Yoko. I'm trying to going down the whole list of rivalries that he had. That's what my main thing was with that. I'm not talking about like infamous who our favorite rivalries are, but that was like the biggest thing. We're going to go through each rivalry, so we'll get
Okay,
to it.
gotcha.
Yeah. That's why I started with Jake because that was like his first rivalry, big one. Then you had the second one, which had to be Yoko, and the third one that we're about to get to has to be Mabel.
Did Diesel come before or after Mabel?
I believe that was in the same year because I know it was in '94 because I believe Diesel faced Undertaker at that year's Mania.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. I don't remember Taker and Mabel as much as I would remember Diesel and Taker. The only thing that really sticks out to me with Mabel and Taker was the short time where Taker had the Phantom of the Opera mask. Other than that, to me, their matches were not very good because at the time, and even later, rest his soul, Mabel just wasn't that great of a worker in the ring, and he just did not catch my eye. You know, it's one of those I looked at, I was like, Taker's got this, I know he does. And I was right, you know. So, it's just, I know that was the first time people had actually seen Taker actually injured and be like, maybe this is a man. But the fact that he came back with an even scarier look was pretty much the only thing great about that, in my opinion.
That's literally like the infamous moment because I feel like that does need to be talked about because that year, how you're talking about Diesel, he faced Diesel with said mask on at that Mania. So that's one reason I even want to talk.
No, he did not have the mask on during his match with Diesel.
I think he did. I think he did at that Mania.
He had taken it off a week or two prior to Mania, I believe.
I remember him wrestling with the mask on because that was like at a time when he still had it. Because his orbital bone was broken, and that's not easy to come back from.
Yeah, but I've seen that match countless times, and Taker does not have that mask on with his match against Diesel at that WrestleMania.
Well, then that must have been my mistake, but I swore he had it at a Mania. It must have been somebody else, but I thought he had it at a Mania.
Oh, that didn't end well.
No, I don't think I've ever seen Taker at a Mania with the mask on. Okay. The closest Mania, again, where he could have had the mask would have been the one against Diesel, and he didn't wear it then.
I don't know. I remember him having the I remember him having the mask and why he had the mask, but I don't know if
Yeah.
he had it on when he faced. I don't recall. I remember the most I remember about the feud he had with Diesel was he had Diesel opened the casket and basically he was laying in the casket. Diesel, he had the Diesel like wax figure or whatever it was laying in the casket when Diesel opened it and all that shit. But I don't remember a lot of it. I didn't particularly care for Men on a Mission. I didn't really care for Mabel or Mo or Oscar or any of them. I can tell you all their names because it was their MOM, Men on a Mission, Mabel, Oscar, Mo. Yeah, I didn't really care for that. And this was at a point in time where I really didn't care for the WWF. So that's I don't really know. Yeah.
Come on.
That was kayfabe, Mike. That wasn't why. The mask was when Mabel ran into the corner and splashed him, and his hand hit Undertaker's eye and crushed his orbital socket.
As Mikey just stated here, it was the result of the leg drops by Yoko and Mabel.
Either way, like I was saying before, I remember more of the Diesel rivalry during that time than I did the Mabel rivalry. Like it's very much true that there was a rivalry there and there was an injury, but it wasn't really a story worth pursuing much,
I'm gonna try to get a
in my opinion.
But you also stated, and I quote, that was the first time we saw The Undertaker actually get injured like a human, was like a big thing right there. Nobody else did that to Taker besides
Exactly.
Now, I will say I did make a mistake. Undertaker did not have the mask at Mania. That was my fault. I was thinking of something else, a different show. But yes, Undertaker, I feel like that was something that was infamous for that because, like you stated, nobody injured The Undertaker like that at that time.
Right.
Nobody could. So I feel like that was something that was big for the story going forward. Because later in that time, we saw what happened, especially with Diesel. He dragged Diesel to hell, which was also an infamous moment when he pulled him through the ring. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think why it really stands out to me most, the Diesel and Taker rivalry as opposed to Mabel, is the psychology and the mind games that Taker started playing. Yes, they've always kind of been there, but they were more prevalent during the Diesel and Taker storyline than before. Yes, he would cut little promos to scare Kamala and other opponents with the casket matches, but as far as pure story and using psychological terror in a rivalry, I think that's one of the earliest examples that we got of Taker doing that. I think that's why that stood out to me most.
Yeah. And Undertaker knew how to work, and Diesel, he was also great at that time too, because he was also friends with Shawn, of course, but he became the champion before Shawn did, and we all knew that that was Shawn's dream. But Diesel and Undertaker's feud, I feel like it's underrated. And a lot of things, you don't hear a lot about Undertaker and Diesel when you look at Undertaker's rivalries, but like that moment where he dragged him under the ring, like I said, that was pretty an infamous moment that he won a Slammy for, and right there, that's like the first time that you see like something like that, of that caliber.
Yeah, I agree. Mike says first use of a lifelike mannequin in a casket repeated later with Kane, Heidenreich, and the Ortons.
Yes.
That's kind of what I was referring to with the psychology,
Yeah.
you know, and then being dragged under the ring. Because who during that time could manhandle Diesel? You know,
Not a lot of people, because a lot of
Not a
people
lot.
were not like Diesel. Because Diesel was like one of the only big men besides Taker and Mabel and Yoko, but like no other big man really faced him like that, like Undertaker did.
Diesel was known for his calm, cool, collected demeanor. Nobody or nothing got to him. Nothing got under his skin. You know, hence Big Daddy Cool. You know, he was always calm, cool, collected. And then along comes Taker, and for the first time, not only do we see Diesel a little bit rattled by the mannequin, but if you watch the clip of him getting dragged under, he's literally flailing in terror. We've never seen Diesel like that.
Yeah. He was scared. Like, first time we actually see scaredness out of him against a man like Undertaker.
Yep. So that's where I brought in the whole mind games and psychology that Taker would use in that rivalry, and it sort of was the starting of using those for future big storylines, the mind games that Taker would play, and becoming more the phenom than like the dead man.
Yes. And we all saw, as we all stated, he was the dead man no matter what gimmick he was in. Even if he was the American Badass, Lord of Darkness, he's always been the dead man, but he also had to develop the dead man so it did not get, like, he had to keep it alive, and that's what made him so captivating over the years. And welcome, Tyler. I love you too, brother. And welcome, AJ. Welcome, CC Young, an up-and-coming lady wrestler that's been wrestling for a while now. Gonna go big post. I want to shout that out. But yeah, Daryl, when it came to Undertaker and Diesel, you can't recall from like anybody ever making Diesel scream like he did, like the Undertaker, like flailing. Can you?
No. Nash put it over very well. I think it leans more on the fact that other than like Yokozuna and Mabel, as far as people that the Undertaker really competed against, I mean, you'd have to figure out a different way to try to attack, you know, Diesel. How are you gonna? Because I can't pick him up and throw him around like that, really, like I would some of the smaller guys, and he's supposed to be so cool and calm and collected. So what can you really do with him? Well, okay. Well, let's bring him out. Let's shake up that calm, cool demeanor a little bit, and let's play some mind games with him. Let's do some shit that's really gonna kind of.
He doesn't hear me. I don't exist.
Kind of.
I wanted you to grab my Kahlua while you were in there, but you wouldn't say anything. You just ignored me.
Welcome, Bexy. Welcome.
Well, I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. It's like when you can't hear me when you've got your headphones on.
I've got my headphones on. You just thought. Just like earlier, you told me you had 4 little chickens in there.
As you were saying, though, Daryl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I'll be right back.
It was.
Oh, that's good, Kerry.
It was another evolution of the gimmick as far as the Undertaker went. So you got to figure out a different way to attack Diesel. So what do you do with him? You got to try to crack the calm, cool composure. So you start throwing mind games at him. You come up to the ring and drag him to hell. You have a casket wheel down to the ring, and when he opens it, it's him laying in the casket. It's just basic character progression. It's adding on to it so you don't get stale. It's putting another layer onto the onion. It's good. You have to evolve. You have to do different things. You have to get better.
And Undertaker being the man that he is, I think what we're also noticing with our conversations, the people that Undertaker was facing had to react certain ways to get him over as much as he needed to get them over.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you don't have people acting like the Undertaker is something to be afraid of, regardless of the fact that he's a very large human being and he's dressed like a zombie Undertaker from the Wild Wild West and shit. If people aren't reacting to it the right way, it's not going to get over. So yeah, I mean, it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street, and he fortunately, whether it be Vince said you better, or it was people who really, cared about their craft and wanted to everybody and wrestling in general to do better. It's good that he had people that would work with him that way.
Exactly. And
Sorry, everyone. I'm back now.
no worries at all, Kerry. Welcome back. Me and Daryl were just talking. I was pointing out a fact that I think we've all noticed throughout here. I was just explaining to him how people had to make Undertaker look good, just as Undertaker had to make them look good. And most of the guys he did do work with, they made each other look good, but they also had to make sure Undertaker's gimmick was protected because of who his character was. Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, wrestling in general, you can't have one opponent benefit the whole time and not the other in any regards. Each superstar has their own character, their own aura that they have to show to the people who are not only at the venue but watching around the world. It's a big thing. So people have to be willing to sell for Taker, sell the fear, sell the pain, sell the strikes. At the same time, Taker has to know, hey, I've got to make sure that I protect them as well. I think I heard somebody say here a while back that when Taker throws a punch, right, it looks devastating. We've all seen those Taker punches. He's the best pure striker in the business. But when he actually makes contact for the opponent to react, it's just a feather-like touch. He knows, hey, I don't really want to hurt somebody unless I'm giving them a receipt for what they did to me.
Yeah. We will talk about a most infamous receipt later when we get to his 2000 rivalry with Randy Orton, and we'll definitely get there. But Undertaker and Diesel, infamous rivalry that will go down as one of Undertaker's best. I think we can all safely say, and that's just, we've already been through that rivalry. Yoko, Jake. Now, Kerry, I think we're going to get to one that you alluded to earlier that I think we do need to talk about. Undertaker versus Undertaker. No. During this time, remember they had a little comedic skit with the guys from the cast of the Naked Gun movies, if you guys have ever seen those. So the detective from the movie was sent to investigate where the Undertaker was, and I remember he was looking down at his desk, under it, and then there's a pizza that comes in, and then you hear the gong of the Undertaker, but then he looks up, that pizza get here, and it's all ominous, and then he's looking in different times for the Undertaker, but then he finds a casket and there's a briefcase that is found as well. But it was I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was funny. I do like the Naked Gun movie, but Ted DiBiase was saying, the Undertaker is now with me, and then he brought his Undertaker, but he did not look like the Undertaker we thought. It was different than what we would think, right? And then it wasn't the real one. And then Paul Bearer, he said he had the real Undertaker, and that's what led to their SummerSlam match. And I think it was wasn't it 1994, Kerry?
1994.
Yes. And then we all saw the real Taker beat up the fake Undertaker, and man, mind you, the fake Taker was played by the Undertaker's real-life cousin, Brian Lee. And may he, good stuff right there. But Kerry, you said that was one of the first moments you talked about at the very beginning of this podcast when you started talking about the Undertaker. You want to take it away?
So that particular pay-per-view and match holds a special place in my heart. When I would spend the night at my Nana and Poppy's a lot, and my cousin Ryan was there, I've referenced him before. We were huge wrestling fans. That would be tape that I would always rent because Nana would take us to go rent any movie we wanted to at the video store, and he would rent a wrestling video, and I would get one. I would get SummerSlam 1994 because on the cover was literally Undertaker versus Undertaker, and I'm like, how can there be two Undertakers at once? And it was so interesting and surreal to see two people playing the same character. And my younger self, I didn't see very much difference in them. And it wasn't until later on in life I knew why, because they were real life cousins. So obviously they're going to look very similar. Yep. But when I revisited it later with older eyes, and I started researching the storyline leading up to it, yes, it is absurd. Okay, it was very obvious that when Ted DiBiase brought out The Undertaker for, let's just say, the second time, reintroducing us to Taker, that was not the same Undertaker. That was a completely different person. And it's interesting, this rivalry and this story caught so much attention that even overseas, they had the Undertaker come in as the Undertaker for a movie. He actually cameoed in a movie as the Undertaker. Brian Lee did. So it was really interesting to see that and to learn about that. So many people were convinced, inside and outside of the storyline, that there were two Undertakers, or maybe Ted DiBiase did bring back Taker. He just looked different for whatever reason. And Brian Lee, bless his heart, he studied Taker's movements, mannerisms, and whatnot in matches and promos. He had it down to a T. You literally was looking at a mirror, more or less, which I found was very, very interesting at the time. And as I said, me being a little kid, it didn't dawn on me that the black attire with the gray gloves, Taker originally wore. I thought it was always the black and purple because that's what I knew Taker wearing.
Oh,
so, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, yeah, he started with the black and the gray, yeah.
Yep, he did start off in black and gray. Technically, his first televised match, he wore black shirt, pants, the gray boots, but his gloves were black.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen
not
video
gray.
of that too. Yeah, yep.
So, and it didn't dawn on me till later, after I'd gotten older, that, okay, my mom was right. He did wear black and gray, and some of the earlier matches before SummerSlam 1994 was, in fact, the real Undertaker before he had the black and purple attire. Yep. So when it's really interesting how much that plays a big part in my developing knowledge of Taker at the time and the lore of the character. So I went off on this tangent. The main thing is Ted DiBiase brought out this fake Undertaker. Okay? A lot of people could see it was fake. Some people thought it was real. And the commentators and everybody, they played on the whole, is he real, is he not story. And Paul Bearer was the only one who knew the truth.
I got you.
He's like, that is not my Undertaker. I can't contact my Undertaker. What makes you think you can? My Undertaker doesn't care about money. Why would your Undertaker care about money? Why would my Undertaker care all of a sudden about money? And so on and so forth. Then later we get that Heartbreak Hotel, the infamous episode where the Undertaker is choking Paul Bear, and then we get the lights flickering, and we hear Taker's voice, and we know that is Taker's voice. And now we're all like, okay, what is going on here? And then there was the vow of a rebirth of the Undertaker prior to this time, because if you remember the monologue from when Taker was put in the casket by all those people after the Yoko rivalry, I believe it goes, "Be not proud, the spirit of the Undertaker lives within the souls of all mankind, the eternal flame of life that cannot be extinguished, an origin that cannot be explained. The answer lies in the everlasting spirit. Soon all mankind will witness the rebirth of the Undertaker. I will not rest in peace." So when you put that together with Ted DiBiase bringing back an Undertaker, then we hear the real Taker's voice, vowing to put Ted DiBiase's Undertaker to rest. We have a recipe for a sci-fi spectacle of a match that has been replicated a few times, but never truly duplicated.
Yeah, most indeed. And when you see somebody facing another person in their gimmick, Daryl, you being a man of the classics, how do you feel about when somebody plays another person's gimmick and they're facing them? How do you feel about that, Daryl?
Well, I've only personally really seen it happen
There's the fire video.
with
Put a row
Kane.
of salt down. I can remember salt being stepped in, Jay.
I kind of sort of somewhat heard it happen with the Undertaker with the whole thing, and then that's how he ended up with the black and the purple and all that kind of thing and all. I don't know, man. I just if the other person can pull it off, it's cool. But you have to have a certain kind of character to begin with that you're replicating that you can do that with. Like more of a so Doink, but there anybody can dress up like a clown. So okay, it's two clowns and okay, whatever. Undertaker, I would have felt like it would have been harder to pull off, and fortunately they were able to find a fellow that was his cousin and looked a lot like him, so it worked.
All unique.
The Kane thing didn't really work for me because that Kane that they brought in was a good bit smaller than Glenn. So that didn't really work. I don't know, man. I have Sting, the fake Sting and all that. I don't know. I mean, you could tell that wasn't Sting. The nose was different, and even though he's wearing face paint, you can still see basic facial structure. His nose was different. He was. I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think he was quite as tall.
They were the same size and about same build.
Yeah, they were around about the same. But you could still. I mean, it wasn't Sting, and you could tell it wasn't Sting.
Exactly.
I think the Undertaker thing worked better because they did look so much alike. There's just not a lot of people you can do that kind of thing with, and for that reason, I just don't really know how much more, how much better you could make it work than it did with Undertaker.
And speaking on that, Mikey did say this in the chat. God love Brian. He tried very hard to be a good doppelganger to Taker, but everyone took one look at him and said, "Give us a break, Ted." But it was a masterpiece of a return for Taker. Poor Luke Gallows, laugh out loud, and he's referring to Kane's doppelganger, who was playing in Kane's old attire, the mask and the gloves and such. And this was when Kane was going off the mask, of course. But the Undertaker versus Undertaker rivalry, that is a part of history within WWE and the Undertaker's career, and for what it was, it is in the history right there. So you have to remember, like, there's different storylines that happen, and whether they're goofy, whether they're dark, it was still something that, like, stuck. And everybody wanted to see the real Taker beat down the fake Taker.
And that rivalry isn't known for being a great rivalry. It was one of those this happened. I never said it was a great rivalry.
Oh, no. That's why I was saying, like, we have goofy stuff, but that's why I was, like, saying I think the only thing people wanted to see from that was the real Taker beat the crap out of the fake Taker. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That was another thing. He literally returned at that time, too. So right there.
And
yes,
see basically Ted DiBiase shit himself.
Yeah, literally. He likes it. Here's the fact, though. He did bring in The Undertaker on his debut, but after that, we never really saw them team up. That is a true fact. We never saw them work together after that.
No. Taker had been mostly, if not exclusively, for Paul Bearer.
Exactly. And like we already stated, he was briefly with Brother Love, but I don't think that even lasted long either before Paul Bearer came in. So, yeah.
1 or 2 episodes, that was about it.
But I did it.
Yeah, right there. And that goes on with the history, and we've talked about that rivalry, and now I think it is fitting that we go into another development of The Undertaker when it came to Paul Bearer. There was some that believed that Paul Bearer was holding Undertaker back. And then there was that infamous moment where Undertaker was feuding with Mankind in different kinds of matches. They had so many battles, a boiler room brawl, a freaking Buried Alive, and later that infamous Hell in a Cell that we'll talk about later. But the first time when Mankind wasn't in that suit and tie, and he had like that brown singlet on where he was pulling his hair out, saying weird things at weird times, and then there was a moment where Paul Bearer was in the ring with Undertaker. Paul Bearer turns his back to Undertaker after Undertaker was like, give me like the urn or something, and Mankind attacked Undertaker from behind, and we just saw Paul Bearer turn on the Undertaker, laughing, and right there, this is when we got to see the Undertaker talk by himself. He did not need somebody speaking for him no more, and this is when we got to see more of the Undertaker, but we also saw Paul Bearer betray, in a sense, his son, which we talk about later. That was his son, but we will talk about that more later. But, yeah, right there, that was a big development right there, seeing Paul Bearer turn on Undertaker and joining up with Mankind. And that is a rivalry that probably goes down as definitely a classic, instant classic right there. Carrie, you want to start this one?
Kyle. You're a pussy, Kyle.
Alrighty then.
My goodness.
Somebody tells me she hates Kyle. Anyway.
She's playing Phasmo with Vex and
Kyle.
Yeah. She gets a little bit loud, especially when she gets a little alcohol in her.
You stay the hell in there until that motherfucker chases you and eats your face. Good go. Then he can eat your ass either way. Get in there. Go sit in that pit.
Okay. Sorry about that. We'll continue the show now.
Oh yeah, but yeah, that's why I asked you about the Undertaker Mankind rivalry as we're starting to talk about when Paul Bearer turned on him.
I thought you was gonna have Darren start us off. I misunderstood.
Daryl? Oh, well, I asked
Daryl,
you.
I'm sorry.
I could ask Daryl. Could start off first if you would like. Daryl, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, I would let him go first because I got a lot to say on that one.
I mean, my first ever real like holy shit moment watching wrestling was when Mankind came off the top of the Hell in a Cell. I would have never thought. And this was late. This was late in their rivalry. This was late in their feud. They weren't really doing anything with each other anymore at this point. They just had a match. They had a Hell in a Cell match at the Royal Rumble. I think it was Royal Rumble, wasn't it?
Oh, so
King of the
this
Ring.
time
No.
period, Daryl,
King of the
this was
Ring.
this was
King of the
before
Ring
the whole
98.
Hell in a Cell match. This was when Mankind was still in his brown singlet, pulling his hair out. They had Buried Alive and a cat. I believe Buried Alive was like the biggest one at this time, and I think the Buried Alive was like a big one. But they had a lot of crazy matches before we got to that Hell in a Cell, which happened later. But this was
Well,
when
yeah, I mean,
Mankind
they
was
had a
still crazy.
boiler room. They had a boiler room
Yes, a
brawl.
boiler
They
room
had a
brawl.
bunch of other
Yes.
shit like that. Yeah. Those matches really didn't stand out all that much to me as much as the Hell in a Cell match did. I mean, the boiler room brawl was okay. I don't particularly care for Buried Alive matches. I don't particularly care for casket matches. I don't particularly care for ambulance matches and dumpster matches or any of that other shit. Yeah, they're part of the rivalry. It built on the story as part of the rivalry, but so if you want to go ahead and start this one off, and then I'll run into it once you get to the Hell in the Cell match, that's fine with me because those were matches that happened and they're part of the story and they're important. But I don't know. I liked Mick as Cactus Jack. I knew it was Cactus Jack when they had him doing the promos in the dark and hollering and had the mouse and the rat running all over him and all that shit. I knew who it was. I get it, but I just until the Hell in the Cell match, I really didn't care about that rivalry.
Now, I do want to say before Kerry gets started, we will be talking about that as we go on because we have to remember some of these rivalries happened again, so we'll be repeating to them when we get there. But in between that, we also had other rivalries that happened for Taker. But I feel like there's other things you could also speak on, Daryl, when we get to it, when we do get to the other rivalries at this time. But Kerry, do you want to talk about the first rivalry between Mankind and The Undertaker before we even talk about Hell in a Cell, though?
Oh boy, do I. All right, so for those who are not educated with the Kane or Mankind and Undertaker saga, you're in for a wild ride if you go back and watch it. So I believe it was late 95, early 96-ish when these started happening. So I'm going to start with the infamous Boiler Room Brawl that led to Paul Bearer betraying Taker. That's what you, Eddie, was referring to.
Yes.
It's the same match. So during that match, Paul was left out in the ring. The object of the match literally was you start in the boiler room and you fight until you incapacitate your opponent enough to make your way out to the ring and retrieve the urn from Paul Bearer. That's it. That's the premise of the Boiler Room Brawl originally. Mm-hmm. So when the match first started, you had Vince and I believe it was Jerry Lawler commentating this match, saying that Mankind was already in the boiler room. Well, Mankind was known to stay in the boiler room. That's where he did most of his promos. Yeah. That's where he talked to the rats, etc., etc. So we see Taker kind of in the hallway, and there was something there that a lot of people didn't see often. Hesitation. There was hesitation from The Undertaker going in there. In character hesitation. Because up until this point, nobody had been able to best The Undertaker. He was in an element and league of his own. And all of a sudden, here comes Mankind, who has been attacking him from behind, who has been putting him out with the mandible claw, something that nobody had really seen anybody be able to do with Taker, put him out with a submission type maneuver that literally rendered him unconscious. And this match was a very brutal match. It had any and all weapons you could think about being used in it. Eventually, Taker recovered enough to go out to the ring and literally on his knee, like he usually does when he did his finishing pose towards the urn. And we see Paul Bearer start to hand the urn to Taker. But he stops, and Taker's like, give it to me, and Paul turns his back. How many years had Paul been with Taker at that point? It was literally a relationship and a partnership that had stemmed across, ever since Taker's debut. It was something nobody could ever see coming. And then
a good 7 years, about 6 to 7 years.
Something like that. Then we have Mankind attack Taker from behind, putting him out with the mandible claw yet again. And Paul doesn't do anything to stop it. He's laughing, smiling. That wicked man then literally hands the urn over to Mankind. But the biggest takeaway of that moment, besides the fact that Paul had just turned his back on Taker, was in the middle of that ring, Taker was not moving. We had always seen him get up, always seen him brush off whatever happened. Instead, the lights dim, out come Druids, and they literally drag Taker out of the ring, carrying him up the ramp and out of the arena. For all intents and purposes, Paul Bearer has literally destroyed the Undertaker and aligned with Mankind. So with that in mind, we had seen the impossible. And a week or two later, as Paul was gloating about how the Undertaker's gone and would never return, he has the Druids bring out Taker's lifeless body, laying it right on the ramp or wherever it was. And he continued gloating. Now all of a sudden, Taker sits up. Taker now has vengeance on his mind. And this leads into the Buried Alive match, I believe. And later into the Hell in Cell.
The Executioner, yes. Bam Bam 40 gets involved.
Yes. So there's a huge story there. And Daryl, if you haven't actually watched that rivalry, I encourage and implore you to do your research and go back and watch it, because it is a fantastic story. And it all culminates in the 1998 King of the Ring Hell in a Cell match, the most infamous Hell in a Cell match in the history of that entire match. There will never be another one like it. And I'm going to say it this way, thank God, because that was horrible seeing what Mick put himself through.
And we'll talk about that Hell in a Cell later when we revisit this rivalry, because that would be the second time that they feuded. But you want to finish up with their first one.
Yes. So the final part of the rivalry ended shockingly with Taker being buried alive again, like how a lot of people did when he was with Yokozuna. It took almost the entire locker room people to bury the Undertaker. And as the show was ending, and after Paul Bearer, it was Mankind, had jabbed the shovel into the dirt and left, lightning strikes the shovel, and Taker's purple gloved hand comes up out of the grave. And we hear Vince proclaiming, "He's alive! The Undertaker's alive!" And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was the last time we saw Taker wearing the purple gloves. Because after that, he started trying different attires that was all black, fingerless gloves as well. There was this one match that he and Mankind had where he descended from the rafters in a leather, like black leather outfit with the bat wings. We've seen clips of it.
Yeah.
So I believe that match was the last time we saw Taker with the purple gloves, and it led into the Lord of Darkness era of The Undertaker. Not Ministry, but Lord of Darkness.
Yes. And so, Mikey also said something regarding this feud. Let's not forget the catalyst to this particular feud was the feud for the Intercontinental Championship with Goldust.
I don't think that was the catalyst so much as that was just a byproduct of it. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's true that Goldust and Mankind were allied, under Paul Bearer. Yes, it was true that Goldust was in a rivalry for the Intercontinental title. I can't remember if he had the belt or if he was going for the belt. I think he had the belt. And I believe
Goldust? You're saying Goldust?
Yeah. I think
Goldust
he had the
was
belt.
the IC champion. Undertaker never held it.
Yeah. Taker, I don't think Taker ever was in contention for the IC title. I think Goldust was just there to help Mankind and vice versa as need be. I think, if I'm not mistaken, during that time, it was Goldust and Hunter Hearst Helmsley for that Intercontinental Championship rivalry. Yes. I could be wrong.
Yes. No, you are right around that time because this was when he was going under before he switched from the British Snob gimmick.
Yes. So, Goldust, aside from just helping Mick Foley from time to time with Taker, didn't have anything to do with that rivalry.
Exactly. I agree with that because when you look back at it, no offense, Goldust and Undertaker, they were on, like, Undertaker was, I am going to say this nicely, like, Goldust was a guy, like, I like Goldust, but he wasn't at the level that an Undertaker was, to be honest.
Now, they did have a match or two where Goldust shockingly was crushing on Undertaker and ended up kissing Taker, but, Taker didn't like that too much.
Yes, he did it. We all saw where that ended up, and freaking. But that
he beat the hell out of Goldust after that one.
Oh yes.
But no, Goldust had nothing to do.
Paul Bearer. Yeah.
Yeah, they were just allies, more or less.
Yeah.
Not even really tag teaming.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But yes, Daryl, just please, go back, do your research, and watch those matches. Watch that story. It's absolutely fantastic. Probably
me and Daryl talked quite a bit. I'll get him through the storyline because me and him watch wrestling videos all the time, huh, Daryl? Oh, he left us.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I guess I I don't know if I insulted him or
I
if
don't
he...
think it's you. He also has a kid and a wife that he taught. So I don't think it had anything to do with you. He doesn't leave unless it's usually important. So I don't think it was you.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe
Okay.
he'll join back when we get to the Hell in a Cell, though. But do you want to say anything else on the Mankind, Paul Bearer, and Undertaker before we get to the next feud? Because I really want to start off the next feud.
Not really, unless somebody in chat wants to talk about it a little bit and give them a minute or two.
Well, I think before we do let that, I want to get into the next one, because the next one involves my favorite wrestler of all time, Kane, and this is when we get to learn more about the Undertaker. I do want to say, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this one.
I will definitely let you take the reins on this one.
So, as we know, Paul Bearer is no longer with the Undertaker, but he wanted Undertaker back at a point, but then he threatened Undertaker that he had a secret, and he was not going to reveal that secret unless Undertaker joined him. Unless Undertaker joined him, he would not reveal the secret. Now, if he wasn't to join him again, he would reveal it. And I believe there was an incident that happened in a match, if I recall, that made Undertaker say for the final time, because I believe they did reunite for a very, very, very short period. I think it was literally one match. And then after that, he left Paul Bearer by himself. And then Paul said he was going to reveal the secret, and then he goes out. A fun fact is the Buried Alive match pay-per-view was my very first WWF pay-per-view. That's awesome, Mikey. That's very awesome, Mikey. But as I was saying, he said that he had a secret, and he explained the story, how he worked at the funeral home of the Undertaker's family, and he had how Undertaker had burned down the funeral home of where his family was, and there was a little boy there that was very disfigured after it, and he was revealed to be Kane. Now, man, mind you, Paul Bearer did reveal that he had an affair with the Undertaker's mother. So, he was like a stepfather, but also a father by Undertaker, as we all know, and Kane. What resulted was Kane. But for weeks, Undertaker did not believe it. And during that promo, he came out, he was trying to choke out Paul, and Paul Bearer was pleading for mercy. Kane's alive! I swear it! And Undertaker, he didn't believe it. And at this time, Undertaker was feuding with Shawn, may I mind you. So this whole time, because they were trying to figure out what to do with Shawn and his pay-per-view, because they were good matches, but they needed more to it. And that's what brought in this Kane story. And now we saw those matches happen, but then it led to a Hell in a Cell at Bad Blood. And that was Shawn Michaels was bleeding like a stuffed pig that night, if anything. But it was Undertaker versus Shawn, right? You know, they're having their matchup for a good, I would have to say at least 30 minutes, if not less or more. And then we see this pyro and red in the arena, and we see Paul Bearer with this figure, this 7-foot giant. Nobody it's gotta be Kane, is what it's said. It's gotta be Kane. And then you see the Undertaker, as we stated earlier. If Undertaker did not do this, like you said, Kerry, it probably would not have gotten over as big as it got. And then Kane rips the door off the hinges of the cell, and that was not planned, which I thought was incredible for a man of his like that to do that, which really scared me in a sense, wow, shit, that's real. And then he beats up the ref, punches him out of the way. I believe it was Earl Hebner, if not Dave Hebner. And then he gets into the ring, has a stare down with the Undertaker. And you see the Undertaker just he doesn't even know what to do. He doesn't know what to say. He thought his brother was dead. Paul Bearer was lying. And then we see Kane, Tombstone, the Undertaker. And then we see Kane basically leave after that. But then Shawn takes advantage of that, beating Undertaker in the Hell in a Cell Bad Blood. And then we see for weeks Undertaker was refusing to fight Kane. He will not fight his own flesh and blood. But for this time, Kane would do things to show that he was more powerful than the Undertaker. I don't know if you remember, but like there was like this whole thing where he was like showing his power compared to the Undertaker, where he would like burn people like at like camera crew and such. But he would have
battle
matches,
of the lightning
but
bolts.
Yes. And because it was darkness versus the fires of hell, which Kane had, and we see Kane trying to get everything he can to push the Undertaker to the limit. Then eventually he pushes Undertaker, and that's what leads to their infamous WrestleMania match where Undertaker had to deliver not one, not two, but 3 tombstones to put away his own flesh and blood. And then we see what happens there. Kane is defeated. Oh my God. Undertaker defeated his own flesh and blood. And then going into that, we see Undertaker somewhat feuding with Kane, but with others. But he also eventually, we saw the team up of one of the most dominant forces in WWF history. Bigger than the Mega Powers, bigger than the Twin Towers, bigger than any team we've ever seen. Kane and Undertaker, the Brothers of Destruction. When you hear that name and you see them together, oh my God. Every single tag team or anybody that ever faced them, they were in for a world of hurting because 2 brothers on the same page that hated each other. And Paul Bear kind of was casted aside. But, and of course, Undertaker was doing his Lord of Darkness, of course, and it came in. Him and Kane would feud on and off and team on and off. But yeah, I feel like that was the born of something like greatness right there, like a story where we saw Undertaker different emotion. We saw the birth of also not only a great rivalry, but probably one of the most horrific teams ever conceived. That's what I want to say on that. I love that storyline. That's my number 1 of all time. I will always state that. But Carrie, do you want to take on this before I go any further and such? Yeah. So.
Yeah, you covered a lot of the highlights of it, but there are certain aspects of it that you might have missed. One of the most sadistic things during this rivalry that happened, and this is what finally drove Taker to finally confront and fight his brother, was Paul Bearer had dug up the graves and the remains of Taker's mom and dad. Okay.
Yes, there was that infamous promo where Kane used us like he was digging it up with Paul Bear.
Digging up bones is how Bear put it. And on the stage, Kane was getting ready to light the parents' caskets on fire. And Taker, blinded by his emotions, rushes to go and fight them. Kane chokeslams Taker into his mama's own casket. The visual that we get, the camera shot that we get, shows Taker literally unconscious on the remains of his mama. There's bones, there's maggots, it's a cinema gold. And we hear the maniacal laughing of Paul Bearer. Then we get the most heart-wrenching promo I think I've ever heard Taker put out, where he is in the graveyard begging his parents for forgiveness for what he was about to do. That the devil stood before him in the form of his own brother. He had vowed that he would never fight his own brother, and now he was being forced to do the one thing that he promised he would never do. And he would pay penance for that. That right there was a huge moment, because in that moment, the next time that Kane and Taker was in the ring was at WrestleMania. And guess who threw the first punch? It was Taker. He went to strike Kane first. He was the one that began the fight. In that fight, though, Taker may have won the match and the bout,
Yes.
But Kane was the one who came out the true victor, because Taker was beaten mentally, and his body was racked. I mean, he was thrown all across the ring, overpowered. In that match, while the result on paper says Taker won, Kane was the true victor. You know, because his brother was broken, literally right there. He may have walked out, but he was not the same. Paul, not being happy with the outcome, vows that the next time that they meet, Kane will win. And the next major match they were in was the Inferno match. And
Which
once
was
again,
a big matchup. I forgot to mention. You are correct. That's my bad. I got too excited.
And once again, Taker walked out the victor.
Yes.
However, he seemed stronger than he was at WrestleMania when he fought Kane. So now the opposite of what Bearer wanted to happen is happening. Taker is overcoming Kane slowly. And eventually, they end up, like you said, teaming up a little bit here and there, running roughshod through the entire tag team division.
Yep.
Only for Kane to betray Taker yet again for another match. I don't remember which one. It didn't live up to the hype of the major two ones that we talked about.
Yeah. Yes.
And once more, Taker walked away the victor. And from there, that rivalry just kind of faded to the back as Taker went on to lead the ministry into the corporate ministry, which, and I might be pulling ahead here a little bit more than you want me to, Taker finally admitted the truth that he did burn down the funeral home, and it was on purpose.
That was during his Lord of Darkness going into the ministry run right there. So you are not, if you want to start talking about, because that technically would be like the next thing we would go to if you want to talk about the ministry and such.
I don't really want to at the moment, because the ministry, for all that it could have been, let's face it, it fell flat. Because during this time, I'll go into it when we get there. But the Kane and Undertaker rivalry is probably the greatest story ever told in the history of WWF.
Amen. Fucking man. I say that all the time to Daryl and anybody that will listen. I'm a sucker for Kane, but like that story that was told, as we just talked about, it was beautiful. It had things develop in one story alone. Like you got to see all different elements. You got to see different things of Undertaker we never thought we'd see. And like you said, Kane won the mental victory over Undertaker that nobody could ever do. Nobody.
No. Nobody had beaten Taker mentally. Nobody had beaten his body physically like Kane did.
Yes.
You know, we talked about how Mabel broke his orbital bone, but he didn't break Taker like Kane did.
Yes.
And it all goes back to Paul Bearer, who knows The Undertaker better than anybody. He knows what makes Taker tick. He knows how to get to Taker. And he knows how to weaponize Taker's weaknesses against him.
Yes. Yes. You are very correct. And that was a wonderful story. And we'll talk about it more as we go on, too, because they had interactions later, but they only revisited their rivalry against each other way later in the 2010s. But they also teamed up here and there throughout the 2000s, which we'll get to when we get there. But this story, I feel like this was like a turning point in WWE, too, I would say, because this led also into the Attitude Era where Undertaker became the Lord of Darkness with the ministry.
it was part of the Attitude Era, but it wasn't the catalyst. The catalyst was, as we all know, Austin's infamous promo. Austin 316 says, "I just whip your ass," and then all of that stuff that started. But as far as what the Attitude Era embodied, an era of more realistic, deeper, darker stories and edgier characters, yes, Taker and Kane's rivalry, it personified that, every single bit of it. So there's nothing, in my opinion, that's more vindicative of what the Attitude Era was about than such a deep storyline like that one.
Agreed. And we also, and before, because if I do remember, before we even get to the Ministry, I know there was a rivalry we did need to revisit, and that was Mankind versus Undertaker, which came before the Ministry ever happened as well.
There was also a mini rivalry, too, between Kane, Taker, and Stone Cold Steve Austin we should probably talk a little bit about. Where
you are correct,
McMahon,
because Kane and Undertaker would interact in these types of matches, and there was times that Kane would help Undertaker in matches that, if I remember, Kane was told not to help him, but then Kane got upset one time, and then he just punched or did his infamous uppercuts that he would do to Taker. And Stone Cold, of course, was like one of the first men to deal with both the monsters by like willingly doing so.
Yep, and we get the infamous dressing up as each other. We saw Kane as Taker and Taker as Kane, and it got to the point where you didn't know which one was which under the outfits. And it was interesting to see Kane as the Undertaker, because we both know it was Taker under a Kane mask doing Kane's moves, but commentators literally thought it was Kane. How would Kane have enough time to put all the tattoos on fake, that sort of thing? But I digress. It got to the point where Vince was like, they're in cahoots, and they would constantly deny it. No, we're not, And eventually they came out. Yeah, we are. What are you going to do about it? There's nobody on the roster who can stop us. And Vince, he agreed. He literally said, there's nobody, no greater force than Undertaker and Kane. And Stone Cold, and he weaponized them against Stone Cold, trying to keep the title off of Stone Cold. But we all know that you can't control an Inferno and darkness. They eventually turned on Vince. And the whole thing, that little storyline ended eventually with Austin stunning both Kane, Taker, and pinning them both at the same time. So it was an interesting story. I wouldn't necessarily call it a rivalry, but it is part of the Kane and Undertaker saga.
Yeah, it's still, because Stone Cold feuded with both the brothers, whether they were together or apart. Like, Stone Cold did have big times with the Undertaker with matches. Like, we know this. So Stone Cold was like a rivalry of the Undertaker that does need to be touched on. Like, I believe The Rock also had his fair share of moments with Undertaker as well, and Kane. So, as I remember,
just moments, but not full-blown rivalries. And whatnot. It was brief moments, and it left fans being like, what if this happened? What if they actually got into a good rivalry?
Exactly.
What could that have done? But
and Undertaker and Stone Cold held the tag titles together. That was Undertaker's first tag title run, too.
Yeah. There was an infamous moment where Taker was provoking Austin. He literally said, he called Austin a boy. He said, get down here in this ring and take what is rightfully yours. And Austin didn't want the title at first. And Taker called out and said, I said, get down here and take what is rightfully yours. So, now Austin's being provoked, and he goes down there and he jerks the title, his half of the tag titles, from Taker. Taker willingly gives it to him. And with that action that Austin did, Taker literally said, from this moment until I face you for the world title, you are the world's safest son of a bitch. Austin didn't like that too much, did he?
Most indeed. And Austin, you don't provoke the badass rebel, the Texas rattlesnake, and anybody that did, well, I guess that you really got Austin's eye, because he really did not give a shit. He was like the first one. Everybody wants to beat up on their boss. So he was one that got the first to be like going after the boss. But as we already mentioned, he stated Kane and Undertaker were the most dominant voice around, but Vince was also scared of Undertaker and Kane, but he knew he was the boss of them, that he thought he could never be touched by them. But we will touch on a rivalry between the Undertaker and Vince later when we do get there. But going, like, he's the badass versus the man of darkness, and like we've already stated, they faced off in a triple threat where, do you remember the triple threat where they each had an implication or whatever? It was like Stone Cold needed to pin either, like, I believe it was like he had to pin a particular person, and Kane could only pin a particular person, and then you could pin a particular person. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, that's the match I was referring to earlier, when the ending was where Austin stunned them both and pinned them at the same time. The stipulation was that Undertaker could not pin Kane, and Kane could not pin the Undertaker. In order for Austin to keep the title, he had to pin either Kane or the Undertaker. So literally, it was Vince stacking the deck against Austin and making it effectively a handicap match without absolutely saying it was a handicap match.
Yeah. Vince with that manipulative mind at the time.
But we're talking about the same match there. The ending of that match literally was Austin stunning them both and pinning them both at the same time.
Yes. And that did lead to another title run for Mr. Austin, and we will be getting to when him and Undertaker face for the title again, where Undertaker wins it in due time. But yes, that was another infamous moment. And big stuff, like, at that time too with them three. Like, we saw all these kind of stipulations being brought in at that time too, which was very unique in some sense. Yeah.
But now we can go on to Mankind versus Taker 2, that rivalry.
Yes. Let's let you start it off. Do you want to talk about I know that the match was infamous, but you also want to talk about what leads up to the match and what happened in the match.
Really, and even both Taker and Mankind had said this, there wasn't really a need or a rivalry building up to that match. It was just Mankind, Cost, and Taker matches again, but there was no real motive behind it. Eventually, it led to the Hell in a Cell match because, bad blood, of course. They've been at each other's throats off and on. This rivalry was literally just like your stereotypical, WWE rivalry. Guy costs you the match, dude wants revenge, etc., etc., and it eventually leads to a big match where winner take all, more or less. So here we are. Taker and Mankind have done most everything they could to each other at this point before the rivalry even began. So what better way to end the rivalry, like definitively, than in the most brutal match of that time, Hell in a Cell.
And this was the second ever Hell in a Cell.
Mm-hmm. So, they were okay doing the match, but Mick wanted to do something different. He knew, in his infinite wisdom, he would never be able to measure up to Shawn Michaels' athleticism. They both knew that their match couldn't be as good or the same as Shawn and Taker's was at the first Hell in a Cell. So Mick had the bright idea, quote unquote, to start the match on top of the cell. And in his words, if he could make the people believe that there were going to be a good match, that it would be a good match, even despite his lack of athletic ability. Now, it needs to be said that at this time, Mick's body was already starting to give out on him from all the years of the death matches and the hardcore style matches he had. He was beat up before that match was even a thing. And I believe the Rock and Mankind rivalry happened right before this, where Mick took so many chair shots he had major concussions and
Yes.
stuff.
No, you're correct. That was their I Quit match for the WWF title.
Yeah. So at this point in Mick's career, he knows that he can't go like, like a prime Shawn Michaels or something like that. So they had to rely on what they call them at the time, oh my God moments, and
Yes.
one shot moments, the big moments. They had to rely on a lot of those to even make this look good. So with that in mind, Taker begrudgingly agrees to start the match on top. Now, prior to the match, Vince had asked Mick, have you been up there? Mick said, yes. And in his interview, he said that was the first biggest lie he ever told of his career. And then Vince asked, are you comfortable up there? And Mick said, yes, which became the second biggest lie of his career. But they both have gone on record saying that they should have never been on top. That Hell in a Cell was not built like it needed to be for 300 plus pounders. And even in the match, you saw that the supports were coming off of the meshing at the top before he even took the plunge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what most people don't realize, the first fall off of the cage that Mick took through the announce table, that one was actually planned. That was something Mick wanted to do. Taker didn't want to do it. And
Exactly.
you could see in the middle of the match, Mankind literally says, he uses his hand telling Taker, come on, do it. Taker finally gives up and just hurls him off. So the first fall was planned. Yes, Mick hit rough. He always does. Okay?
Exactly.
Let's call a spade a spade. He's always going to hit rough. He's going to make it look and feel bad. But it's the second fall that was not supposed to happen. Okay, Mick was fine after the first one. Yeah, he was a little banged up, but he was not injured from that fall. It was the second one that injured him. And Taker went on record in an interview saying, I thought I killed him for real. He literally thought he killed Mick. And when Terry Funk was down there, and there was a brief interaction between Taker and Terry Funk. Taker asked Terry, "Is he breathing?" And Terry said, "Yes." And they knew they needed to buy time, so that's where Terry Funk went to attack Taker, and Terry gets the infamous chokeslam out of his shoes.
Yep.
It was fun to see, but that match is going to go down in the annals of history as the most brutal Hell in a Cell match ever.
Most indeed. And I think you also remember the infamous. It was like there was the tooth moment where it ended up in Mick's nose after the choke slam through the cell.
It wasn't through his nose. It literally came out of his lip. It came out of his lip and stuck right under his nose.
Yeah, and
there was literally a hole in his lip.
Mm-hmm. And you could see it right there, and that was there was like a clear shot of his face, and it was like, whoa, bro. And remember, he was when he was being pulled out, he said, "No, I want to go back. I want to go back," and he went back, and he continued on, and that match, like you said, one of the greatest Hell in a Cells in history. That can't be topped. That was literally the second Hell in a Cell.
Mick's body was on autopilot, after when he was getting carried out on the stretcher. He literally in the back asked Undertaker, "Did I use the tacks?" Because he couldn't remember.
Yeah,
and
he couldn't.
That infamous shot where Mankind is in the turnbuckle with his mouth all bloody and that tooth right under his nose. You can't see it because of all the blood, but he's sticking his tongue through the hole of his lip.
Yep. He explained that.
So,
yeah.
After the second fall, Mankind was literally running on instinct and pure adrenaline and love of the business and wanting to give the fans everything that they paid for. He ended his career in that match. Yes, he had a few matches afterwards, but he was never as athletic or as involved in a match as he was after that.
And Vince, I think you know about this. Vince told him in the back, "I appreciate everything you've done, but never do something like that again."
Yeah. And that's the only time I've ever agreed really with something Vince said. I don't ever put yourself in that kind of situation again. That's too far to go for a business. And, I think despite his bad reputation, Vince actually truly does care for his employees.
Yeah. It's proven with how we were talking about earlier, his relationship with certain families, especially the Wild Samoans and their family, and he cared for Undertaker as well. They had a great relationship backstage. Vince cared for Austin. He cared for Kane. There was quite a few people that Vince cared for.
Yeah.
I know he hates to admit it, but when Andre died, he cared for Andre. Even when he was alive, he cared for Andre, but he did say he never shed a tear, but I also feel like there may have been tears that maybe he never wanted to talk about that he may have shed for Andre. But there was a lot of people that also he had to work with that also lost their lives, and he cared for them. Yoko, he cared for Yoko, and Vince, he may have been not the greatest of people, but he cared for his talent, like you said. So, yeah.
But and there's so much more we could talk about when it comes to the King of the Ring 98 match, but I believe we're beating a dead horse. Everybody knows that match. It is that infamous.
Yes.
So unless you have anything you want to say specific about it, I think it's safe to move on from that one.
Most definitely agreed, because as you said, Mick was done at this point, but then he came back for a few matches. But then, because he actually was in a role that we'll talk about later involving the Undertaker, as we will get there when we get there. But I know that you said that the Ministry was not like as it did plummet. You are correct. But we do also, I feel like it does need to be a little bit talked about with how it happened. If you want me to go for like a brief summary of it, I will, and you can say whatever you would like to say on it, if that's okay with you.
That'd be fine, but I'm going to add one more little thing to the Hell in a Cell match that most people may not realize. Taker was wrestling on a broken foot in that match. So
yes.
It needs to be said that even through injuries and illnesses, Taker has always been there for his matches. There'd have to be something major wrong for him not to make a match.
Most agreed.
And you could see him favoring his foot after he drops from the cell and lands on the mat. That stumble was where it hurt his foot. But he was wrestling on a broken foot even before he dropped from the cage.
Exactly.
But yes, you can briefly go over the Ministry, how it came to be. There is one moment, two, actually, I really want to talk about when it comes to the Ministry. First is the sacrifice of Midian, or Dennis Knight to become Midian. There's technically 3 Ministry of Darkness moments. The next being the Brood joining, where Gangrel almost literally got hung for real.
Yes.
And Boss Man hanging from Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania.
Yes. Those are infamous moments that I actually was going to bring up in there. Freaking, you brought up some great moments. And when we go back to where it all started with Midian, aka Dennis Knight, who he was originally, because he also was a Phineas Godwin, as we remember as well.
Yes.
So right now he was Dennis Knight, and the Acolytes, Bradshaw and Farouk, they kidnapped Midian, and then they put him in like what I would say almost like a boiler room setting in a sense, where they kept him. And I do remember he like being released from said thing, and he was going to the commentary booth warning everybody about what was to come and such, and like how he was so enlightened. But the Acolytes were told to go get him from there by the Undertaker, of course. And of course, Paul Bearer was back with Undertaker at this time. And you also did state the other infamous moments that happened with other characters. Like there was other factors to the Ministry, but there was a 6-man tag. I forget who Midian and the Acolytes faced, but there was a 6-man tag at a point too that they had. And because if I remember, the Brood was like an original rivalry with the Ministry, if I recall, before they joined up. And like you said, there was that moment where Gangrel was almost practically hung, and they were doing that vampire thing, which was very infamous with the blood baths, and he was like a vampire.
There was not a rivalry between the Brood and the Ministry.
So this was after. I'm thinking of after.
Yeah, there was only that one match, and then after the match was finished, it was revealed that they joined.
Exactly. And then they joined up Edge and Christian and Gangrel under the Brood. And then, because they were revealed under them Ministry, like those Druid outfits, where they were all revealed to be members. And then they would carry out the Undertaker's bidding for Viscera, who was still going by Mabel at the time before he became Viscera. And then that was at the 2000 Royal Rumble that happened, that they kidnapped him. And then he became a member, and he was like the big enforcer, I would say, for like, because we already know the Acolytes were like the enforcers, but he was like the biggest guy in that group, and he became more darker with his character. And then we saw the Ministry of Darkness.
That was the most intimidating Viscera or Mabel has ever been in his career. Even when he was Big Daddy V before he passed away, he was never scarier than he was as Viscera in the Ministry of Darkness.
Those eyes of his, those eyes, and how he had his hair, and when he would do that, like he would stick out his tongue, like it was just like you had that like that aura to him, and it really did work, and he was scary.
That kind of metal sort of casings over his teeth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
I tell you who it reminds me of.
Okay.
And he may have drawn some inspiration from Viscera. It reminds me of Bray.
You know, I could see that. I could see that. Like, I wouldn't doubt, because Bray, he was a master of the game, but he also learned from those that came before. Like, he was a very
Think about their
evil.
eyes. How Bray would make his eyes go wide and get that maniacal look on his face.
Like that smile too that he would do.
It's very reminiscent of Viscera.
I could see that now that you're saying that. I see that. Yeah. You know what? I see that right there. That
the colored contacts when Bray became the Fiend, and then his last match with LA Knight, the contacts that glowed in the dark, in the black lights and stuff. And you can trace that all the way back to Viscera when he had those white-out contacts.
I can see that. And what Viscera did with that, like you said, he was scary, and I was a fan of all his gimmicks. Mabel, Viscera, the world's largest love machine, and Big Daddy V. I loved all that. May he rest in peace. And going in with the Ministry, there was also before the Brood were ousted from the group, before we do get to that, there was that moment where Undertaker was, he was basically warning Vince that he was gonna basically make a sacrifice and take somebody dear to him, and then we all knew who it was going to be when Stephanie. But this was also a development with Stephanie's character, and then we had that infamous wedding per se on
the Dark Wedding.
Yes, the Dark Wedding between Stephanie and Undertaker, where Paul Bearer was the minister of, whatever you like to call it, the preacher. Yeah. And then Stone Cold made the save before it could be done, and she was hugging on, but you could see Austin was like, I'm just only doing what's right. He didn't want to hug her back because he hated Vince, but he was not a prick like that. He was not going to let something like that stand. And then Vince McMahon, like the only time that you ever see him say thank you to Austin in that sense, like he was like, thank you. And then freaking he's taking back his daughter. But then we'll get more into that when we get to the corporate Ministry. But Undertaker, eventually there was a time where the Brood were ousted because Christian gave up something to them. I believe it was the location of something. I forget what it was.
Stephanie.
Yes, the location of Stephanie, and then Christian and the Brood were ousted from the group, and they, like, we already talked about their like one little match after, but it wasn't really. It was like not really much of a rivalry. It was just kind of like a thing that happened after they were ousted. But then that led us to.
Okay, so I got to correct you. When they joined, the night that they joined, and it was revealed that it was the Brood under the hood, that was the night that their match happened. Okay, that was the match where Taker and Midian and I believe it was Taker and Midian and one of the acolytes, I can't remember which one, was fighting.
I thought it was both. I thought it was both the acolytes.
It might have been the acolytes.
Because they said that one UK pay-per-view.
Okay, I'm wrong. It was Midian and the acolytes versus the Brood.
Yes. But then later that night,
the Ministry came out on top. Taker comes down, and then as referees were trying to break up the fight between the Brood and the Ministry. Both the Brood and the Ministry was throwing the referees out like it was some sort of initiation. And then we see Undertaker come out, lay hands on all of them, particularly Gangrel, and shove him off, hanging him. And there's a brief moment where you can see Gangrel pinching, I believe it was Bradshaw's arm, because he was legit choking. And so later that night, the Ministry came back out, and it was revealed under the hood the 3 new members, and it was the Brood.
Yes.
Now, the betrayal happened later. I don't remember if there was
It happened before the wedding because Christian gave up the wedding, as I was trying to say earlier. That was my bad. I got confused on that.
Yeah.
But then they got ousted from the group, and then it was literally down to Viscera, Midian, the Acolytes, and Undertaker, and Paul Bear within that group. And then that's what eventually led us to the formation of the corporate ministry after the whole saving Austin saving Stephanie from Undertaker's clutches. And then that's when we find out that Vince was the mastermind behind this whole situation of Stephanie getting kidnapped and all the bad things just to get at Austin. And then that's also when we see Stephanie's character develop from a billion-dollar princess to a conniving, I'm just going to say it, a conniving bitch.
Mm-hmm. But there's not much to talk about when it comes to the corporate ministry. The real notable thing during this time was the developing tag team of the Unholy Alliance.
Undertaker and Big Show. And if we remember, Viscera and Midian were still loyal to her at the time, but the Acolytes were kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah, they had left at that point.
Yeah. And then Undertaker and Big Show, as the Unholy Alliance, won the WWF tag titles twice. But remember, there was a time that Undertaker was, like, injured or whatever, so Big Show was doing most of the work for them.
Okay, so that was the next part I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
During that whole run as the ministry, and this is why it fell flat, Taker couldn't wrestle very much, if at all, because he was suffering from a groin tear, like a legit tear.
Yes.
He was there as a mouthpiece and just every now and then, few seconds in a match. The rest of the time, it was the ministry and his cronies doing all the work, including Big Show when Taker would be on the commentary team talking about tough love and all that stuff about Big Show. Taker could not physically wrestle, and that's part of the reason it fell flat.
Yes. It wasn't the same.
Had Taker been able to wrestle and actually do what needed to be done in the ministry, there wouldn't have been a corporate ministry.
That is true. That is true. And corporate ministry basically turned into I would have to say, the McMahon-Helmsley faction at that point.
Yeah. That's essentially what it became.
Yeah.
But by this time, with Taker and Big Show running as the Unholy Alliance, the corporate the ministry is done pretty much. That's why I said that they didn't get to go very far. Yeah, they still had their matches and was still technically the Ministry of Darkness, but there was no story going with them because, Taker was injured. You couldn't do much with that.
Exactly.
So,
and now,
after that, we get to the point where Taker basically said, "Screw you, Vince," and left.
Yep. And we all know what that leads to. And then I do have to point out, during 1999, at a point before he was officially injured, he did hold the WWF Championship in 99 for what would be his third run. But then going off of that, though, that was from Steve Austin at Overloaded. But after he said "screw you" to Vince, like you said, that leads us into the 2000s of when he becomes. Well, I'll let you take this one away.
I don't know if this was one of your favorite eras or not. It was okay to me. I wasn't the
What,
biggest fan of
2000?
it. Yeah, when he first came back as the American Badass. All right.
Oh, I mean, I've always like there was good things about 2000, but it's not like the big talked about year. I mean, like for me, I mean, there was good things in it, and then there was questionable things in it, you know. But if we're talking about straight Undertaker, that American Badass entrance, but he came in the first time was pretty cool. I thought. I don't know. I just thought it was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
And it was cool that he was trying to be the one to take it to Vince and the McMahon-Helmsley regime
Yeah.
as a one-man army, more or less. But to me, growing up with Taker the way that he was, that was not Undertaker to me. This was just
Okay.
somebody completely different.
Okay.
But we all know that he had to evolve with the times because
Exactly.
WWE was taking a more realistic turn, and it didn't have room for these fantastical creatures or gimmicks. And a hybridization of The Undertaker was not an idea yet. So Mark had to do something. So he rolled the dice and tried the whole biker gimmick out, the American Badass gimmick, and it worked, you know. But the first thing I thought, and I'm going to show my age when I say this, the first time I saw Taker ride out on a motorcycle, I'm like, this was already done with Disciples of Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Right or wrong?
What? Oh, yeah, the whole biker thing. Technically, it was because remember that happened during around the beginning of the Attitude Era as well in '96. That it was going into '97, but then that whole gang wars thing kind of fell apart.
Yep. And even earlier than that, the Road Warriors would come out on motorcycles every now and then.
Yes, you are correct. When they did
So-
that, also that famous entrance at SummerSlam with Rocco the Dummy.
Yep. So I'm sitting here, and I see Taker. I know it's Taker, but it's not my Undertaker. So
Yeah.
I was disappointed. The American Badass run had some okay moments, but to me that just was not the Undertaker. That was a man who was
The Undertaker that you grew up with.
Yes, that was a man who was stuck between eras in wrestling.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes, I get what you're saying.
So during this time, I'm just gonna kind of summarize what I think was the highlights of the American Badass era. 2001, when he was tag teaming with Kane, and they were just absolutely dominating as a tag team.
And part of the Alliance story, against the Alliance, they were Team WWF. Undertaker was the one keeping the team together.
Yeah. Next biggest highlight. He turned heel.
Yes.
And made JR kiss Vince McMahon's ass. That was the birth.
God.
That was the birth of Big Evil, which is past what some people know was the first encounter between Triple H and Taker at WrestleMania. To me, okay, Taker got his head busted open by a sledgehammer, wants revenge. Okay, sure. You know, most any man who gets injured is going to want, you know, their payback. Big deal. All right. After turning heel, he got hardcore title, and I believe he got another WWE title when he beat Ric Flair at WrestleMania. No, it wasn't for a title, was it?
No, because remember, Flair was doing that whole like general manager thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at that time, that Undertaker was Big Evil. Remember, 2002 was when they had the first official draft, and he was drafted to Raw, and he did not like that Flair picked him.
No. So, with this Big Evil gimmick going, which was okay, it was better than the generic American Badass that we got. We see him turn face again and show Jeff Hardy respect in probably one of the best underrated ladder matches of all time, in my opinion.
When Jeff became the undisputed champion, and because Undertaker beat Hulk Hogan for the title after winning that #1 contenders tournament.
That's what it was. Okay.
Yes.
I knew there was a title in there somewhere.
Yes.
But was it the undisputed title?
Yes. At the time, it was called the undisputed title. Remember, because in 2003-ish to 4-ish, remember Brock Lesnar won it, and then he took it over to SmackDown at a point from I believe it was The Rock, when The Rock was holding it, and then that's when Raw brought in the old WCW World title.
Right.
Yes.
But my point is, we're getting to mid-run of the American Badass Big Evil saga.
Yes.
He turned face and showed Jeff Hardy respect in a really good ladder match. Then there was a short, not very good rivalry between him and John Cena when Cena came in. And we get to late 2007, early 2008. The Vince McMahon versus Undertaker Buried Alive match.
That was 2003, not 2007, 2008. That was 2003. Because that was at the Survivor Series of that year. I know exactly what you're talking about. Because in that matchup, Kane interfered. Remember?
Yes.
Kane interfered in the match. Because Kane had an ambulance match against Vince's son, Shane. So
Yep.
Vince, earlier in a promo on SmackDown, I think it was, by God, I have been chosen to face The Undertaker and Buried Alive. And Vince was a bloody, stuffed pig. So without Kane, Vince would not have won at Survivor Series 2003, because if you remember, this is when he got buried, and then he returns the next year as the full Dead Man character with the pants in 2004, where he faces.
That's where I was going with that. I got my years mixed up.
You're perfectly fine. I know exactly what you're going at. Yeah.
Late 2003, I believe, was Survivor Series.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it was. Because
no, yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
It was an anniversary of Taker's debut. It was time to bury the American Badass gimmick and make a hybrid Taker that we get later on, that has these epic freaking matches that we'll get to. But
yes,
with the American, that's literally all that I can remember. That's the highlight of the American Badass run, unless there's something you remember that I don't.
So when it came to the American Badass, I do want to point out there was a time that he held, I don't know if you remember, he held the tag titles in 2000 with The Rock, which was very brief. And like you said, him and Kane had that run in 2001 where they were Team WWF versus the Alliance. They took on the likes of Sean O'Hare, Chuck Palumbo, DDP, Chris Kanyon, but they were on the Survivor Series team for Team WWF, where it was those two, Big Show, The Rock, and Chris Jericho versus Team Alliance, RVD, Shane McMahon, Booker T, Kurt Angle, and Stone Cold. And there was this one backstage promo that Undertaker did because The Rock and Chris Jericho were feuding, but they were on the same team. He walked in with Kane. He's like, I've been here a long damn time. I'm not ready for my career to be over. We're a team, damn it. We got to start acting like it. Do I make myself clear? Like, he was settling right there. He was like, I'm the big dog right here, and I'm going to make sure this team stays alive. I don't want my career to be over. And during that match at Survivor Series, he gets eliminated Chris Jericho gets that he's eliminated, and he's trying to cost the WWF the match because The Rock is the final survivor. Then Undertaker's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he's literally following him to the back, like Chris Jericho's all scared, doing his heel thing. And Undertaker's like, "Get in your ass to the back, boy." And then, of course, Team WWF wins. He also held the Hardcore title before the Alliance's last match in that Survivor Series match against RVD. I do want to point out. And as you were saying with the him showing like he Hogan, as we stated, for the undisputed championship after winning that tournament, and then he showed respect to Jeff Hardy after losing it. But and then 2003 was where he was buried with Vince with help from Kane. But this is also where he started to play mind games with Kane going into 2004, where they would meet again. Because you remember, there would be times that the gong would go off, and then Kane was like, no, it's not back. He's not back. And then freaking, I remember this one time in the Royal Rumble, the gong goes off, Kane gets eliminated, and then Spike Dudley is coming out because, well, they like to bury Spike at that time for some odd reason. But anyways, he chokeslammed Spike on the ramp right there. But over these leading up to WrestleMania, he kept on getting distracted by this gong saying the Undertaker's dead, there's no way. And when we get to WrestleMania 20 in 2004, he does not believe the Undertaker is going to show up. But look who shows up, like you said, a hybrid Undertaker. Now, Undertaker did not come alone. Who was with him? Paul Bearer. And I do have to point out, this was at a time that Paul Bearer was trying to get over the death of his wife, and he was getting bigger. And it was really sad to see because he can't get in the ring. And it was pretty sad to see that, but he was still there. It was good to see Paul back with Undertaker, where it all began. And then Kane and Undertaker have about like a good 14-minute classic, I want to say, if not longer or shorter. But that happened. Undertaker's streak continues, and we see this Undertaker go on to feud with the likes of Randy Orton, which I think would be the next rivalry I think we would be taught, because that rivalry was pretty infamous in helping Randy, who he became. And the infamous, how you were talking about receipts earlier, I feel like you might bring it up, but there was that receipt that you were talking about earlier with receipts. But yeah, that's what I remember from the Dead Man, from the big evil biker gimmick to the hybrid gimmick. If you would like to say anything else on that hybrid gimmick before we get into the Randy rivalry.
So I'm going to correct myself on the Jeff Hardy and Taker match. I was going over in my head, something didn't sound right about that. Jeff didn't win that match. Taker retained that title, which is why I thought, undisputed title on Jeff. He's never had that title. And then it dawned on me, the reason Taker showed Jeff so much respect is Jeff never quit. And at the end of the match, he literally stood up and told Taker, "I'm still standing, you haven't killed me yet." And, that's what made the face turn, because Taker was about to strike him again, and he's like, "No, you did good," basically. Yeah, so
showing him that respect.
Now, you talked about one of your favorite moments during the Mind Games with Kane. I'm going to tell you mine. Taker was playing the Mind Games. Heavy Mind Games. Kane was standing in the middle of the ring. The fog rolls up from the bottom of the ring, and we see the ring literally lifting up like it was breathing, like a grave moving. That's my favorite moment.
That was, beautiful moment. I love that moment, actually. I forgot to mention that. Thank you for that reminder. I like that moment, too. Good moment.
That was a wonderful moment during the Mind Games. But there was a brief moment before we get to the Randy Orton thing that happened. It involved Paul Heyman.
Yes, where he chokeslammed Paul. He had that neck brace. Paul had that neck brace.
This moment was really interesting because it was the first time that Taker walked out doing his slow entrance, and when he took the hat off, underneath the hat he wore the bandana, as well. And this was the hybrid Taker, mind you. He wore the bandana as well. And Paul Heyman looks like he's seen a ghost. And he literally yelled out, "Oh my God." Like, literally, "Oh my God." I think that had something to do with the Brock Lesnar rivalry with Taker. Because Taker was coming back and he was haunting literally the people that wronged him, if I'm not mistaken. And
But
he took
he
his
did put
frustration.
Paul Heyman in that brace, though. He did put Paul Heyman in that brace.
Yes, he chokeslammed Paul, and Paul
Yeah.
had to wear the neck brace after the chokeslam. But I believe
Exactly.
in that match, I believe it was a Rey Mysterio match. He fought Rey Mysterio in that match.
One of the rare
If I'm
times we
not
actually saw him face Ray. One of the rare.
Yeah, but that kind of stuck out in my mind. That's kind of always been something that would have been really cool to see carry over for a few years, is to see the bandana under the hat, to show the two as one for a little while.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
But on to Randy Orton. Lots of mind
Yeah.
games, lots of good moments here.
Indeed. And we saw different elements be involved, like Cowboy Bob Orton, which we'll get to. And how I remember this, because Randy at the time was doing his legend killer thing where he was taking out legends, Roddy Piper, Jake Roberts, even the fabulous Moolah herself. And he was like, Randy Orton, legend killer, RKO.
Yeah.
And he was going through all these different legends, and there was a legend on the roster, which was literally like a godsend in a sense, because we got to see a match where Randy got to test his skill against a longtime legend that's still fighting, the Undertaker. And this rivalry, gosh, it went from, oh my gosh, so many different elements. It was a beautifully told story. Now, they had a match at No Mercy. There was a handicap match. I am going to get to them, of course. I'm just saying which ones I remember. There was the handicap match, the No Mercy match. Then there was the return at Survivor Series. But there was also the big WrestleMania match that we saw. But that WrestleMania match between him and Randy tried everything he could to take out Taker. And that's when Bob Orton basically tried to help his own son, tried to defeat Undertaker. But we saw even when Bob did that infamous, the cast thing that he was wearing even from back in the day, it did not take out the Undertaker. The Undertaker still got up, and they were shocked. And Randy Orton shocked faces. I don't know if anybody talks about this, but he could sell like crazy, because he always played that conniving heel that was like, what? You do. Nobody kicks out of my RKO. Nobody kicks out of my moves. And you see Randy trying to do everything he can, but then Undertaker continues his streak. But then there was a 2-on-1 match that I remember Bob Orton was involved in it. And we all and then that happened, but then there was that thing that happened with the casket being set on fire by Randy with Undertaker in it. Do you remember that?
Yes, I can help you with that.
Yeah.
Prior to that return, which I believe that was a Survivor Series return.
Yes. It was that Survivor Series 2005, SmackDown versus Raw, the first ever brand war.
There was a tribute show for Eddie Guerrero, rest his soul.
R.I.P.
And I believe it was Ray who drove the lowrider out during his match. And the lowrider pretty much stayed out there for the whole show. And what had happened was during the segment with Randy and Bob Orton and Taker, they had attacked Taker, knocked him out, and draped him across the trunk of the lowrider. And Randy Orton had driven the lowrider all the way back through the SmackDown set, and there was explosions in the back from the electronic equipment and everything, and smoke coming up from the bottom of the now wrecked lowrider.
Yes.
And he was proclaiming he killed The Undertaker, finally. And I forget how many weeks afterwards passed, because that's how they closed the show, was, not knowing if Taker was okay or not. A few weeks later, Taker, he returns in this casket. The casket was lifted up on the stage, and Randy Orton is in the ring just flabbergasted. He's like, no, it can't be. He's literally scared. He had been throwing a party for himself, I guess, for winning a match or whatnot, and he was begging people to let him down.
Oh,
let him
so
down.
this was when he won the Survivor Series match. That's when he became the sole survivor.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was, because that's the same pay-per-view he returned at, because remember the casket got brought up by the Druids and it got hit with lightning? Yeah.
And it set on fire, and he knocked down the casket lid, which fell. And we see Taker come out, but there's something different. He looks more like when he first debuted. He has the full beard this time.
Yes.
If you recall. And I kind of wish he had kept that for a little while, because it was a throwback. He literally debuted at Survivor Series with that full beard and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a throwback and a return for that to happen. And when Taker came out of that casket and made his way to the ring, he cleaned that ring out.
Choke slamming fools. There was the fools that not the fools, but the wrestlers that I remember. There was like Funaki, Paul London, Brian Kendrick, William Regal got the final tombstone. I know that. Sylvan was like the first one thrown out, but he was choke slamming, beating the crap out of everybody. Undertaker, tombstone, William Regal, and then just stared down at Randy, and then he did his signature pose with the throat slash, and then we all knew what was going to come, that Randy and Undertaker had to face once again.
Yep. Can I just say that seeing William Regal take the tombstone spread eagle was absolutely hilarious. His legs were spread open like fucking crazy.
And William Regal, one of the last travelers at the time that actually was competing during the carnival days of pro wrestling, which is a big testament to who he is.
Yeah, but when Taker came back and whatnot, that led into, let's see, after Survivor Series,
there was a match between them. I forget which match it was. Wasn't it a casket match?
I don't remember. I think they just started building up to a final WrestleMania match. It was just on and on with the story. No?
But it actually wasn't a WrestleMania, because remember, 21 has just passed. This was 2005. The next year's WrestleMania, he took on Mark Henry at Mania in a casket.
Okay. So after Survivor Series, I'm trying to remember.
I'm blanking on the last match. I almost feel like it was a casket match, I thought, unless it was just like a regular match that was very brutal.
I think you're right. I think it was a handicapped casket match between Randy and Bob Orton versus Taker, in which he closed the casket on both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember if it was a pay-per-view match or just a SmackDown match. I'm almost certain it was a pay-per-view.
Maybe No Mercy, because No Mercy was a SmackDown pay-per-view. I think they did have, I believe that was their No Mercy match, if I recall.
I think so.
Yeah.
But either way, that was a storied rivalry.
Do you want to talk about the receipt that Randy Orton received during one of these matches? Remember when he beat The Undertaker with the chair?
Yeah. So Randy got a hell of a head whack with one, busted him clean open. I don't think I've ever seen Randy lose so much blood as I saw that night. And I think I think Randy's ears were ringing for a couple of days after that one. I know mine would be.
Oh, yeah.
But that was probably one of the most wicked chair shots I had ever seen. Not as wicked as the shovel shot Vince took from Taker, though. Jesus. Anyway,
What
I
do you think? Which one do
backtracked.
you think hurt worse, the chair or the shovel?
Definitely the shovel, because I actually saw the blood splatter off of that one. Legit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jesus Christ. We might have to do a part 2 of the Taker thing here, because I'm getting tired and I'm losing my voice.
No worries. We could definitely do a part 2. This has been fun. Thank you for doing this with me, and thank you to Daryl Williams and everybody else that came on. Hella fun.
I think a part 2 would be great, because it's getting late, I'm tired, my voice is about gone. I hate to do that to you, but I think
Well, this would be the first two-parter for us, too, for TPW Takedown. This will be historic. First ever two-parter.
That'd work. That's history making. Again.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to do it tomorrow, or do you want to do it another day?
We can try tomorrow. A lot of it depends on if on how tired I am after we're working on this building.
Okay.
Monday I work and it's Memorial Day, so that's not a good day at all. Tuesday I work. Wednesday I'm off. So we can either hit tomorrow or Wednesday.
Let's see how you're feeling tomorrow, and then if it's not tomorrow, we'll do it Wednesday. How about that?
That'll work.
All right. Well, thank you again to everybody that showed up. Daryl, Carrie, always a pleasure. We're going to pick up with a part 2 tomorrow. We do hope everybody has a great good night, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever y'all may be. Peace out.
Later.